Good evening, everybody. It is January 28th, 2024. Got the year right this time. I'm feeling pretty proud of myself for that. And welcome to another one of our weekly live Alberta Politics Roundups. I'm your host, Nate Pike. This is The Breakdown. We're going to get into it. We got a lot. Oh, we got so much to talk about tonight. But before we do, we're going to give you guys some serious whiplash tonight because we got a serious thing. It's actually a serious thing. It's not just like Daniel Smith did a bad thing. I mean, that's obviously serious too, but we got a serious thing that we got to talk about tonight. And I'm never sure how to react to some of the emails that we get. I'm never sure how to present them entirely well, depending on the content. We do, for context, we get a lot of messages from people who are struggling. We get a lot of messages from people who are dealing with a lot of different challenges in this province right now. And we received one this week, this weekend in particular, that I'm probably going to do a poor job of presenting. Because I don't think that there's any good way to present it. I want to be really clear. I'm not trying to blame anyone or anything like that, but I feel like there's a message that we need to make clear. And I don't, I'm going to screw this up no matter how I do it, so I'm just going to plow through it and we'll hope for the best. We received an email a couple days ago from the wife of one of our listeners, one of our regular audience members. Now, what the wife said was that he was somebody who regularly followed the show. He regularly forced her to look at some of our content, whether it was Twitter posts or videos or at around Christmas time, they apparently both fell quite ill. And it had turned into something of a protracted illness, sort of a respiratory virus type thing. And he only got worse. And the wife reached out to let us know that just a couple of days ago, he took a turn for the seriously worse, and he passed away. One of the questions that the wife posed in the email, and I don't know how to answer this question, but one of the questions that the wife posed in the email was, I don't understand why he waited. He was so concerned about the state of the healthcare system. I don't understand why he waited. And that's a question that's never going to get resolved, unfortunately. There's no question that the healthcare system is in a tremendous state of disarray right now. We spent a lot of time talking about it on the show. We're going to spend a lot of time talking about it tonight on the show because there's some very real problems. But I want to be super clear on behalf of myself and everybody who's involved with the show. No matter how bad the healthcare system is, if you think that you need help, if you think that your health is at a point where you need help, if you can't get to see a GP, I know there's lots of horror stories out there about the emergency room, but if you think that you need help, or if a family member is saying to you, I'm concerned that you need help, get help. If you have to wait in the emergency room for 12, 24 hours, it's better to do that. If you're sick, if you've got a serious problem going on, it's better to do that than to wait, because you never know what's going to happen. So from all of us at the show to, I'm sure this person probably knows who we are. We're not going to use any names. We just offer our sincerest condolences. And to everybody who's listening or watching, whether you're watching live or listening to the podcast, if you think you need help, go get help. Because there are people in the healthcare system who care deeply about you. They care deeply about your outcomes, and I don't want to have to have this. I don't want to get more emails like this. And I'm not saying bad to the wife. I want to be really clear about that. The fact that our show meant enough to her husband that she felt compelled to reach out is a weighty honor. But if you need help, get help, because it's not worth it. Let the firefighters be the heroes. That's what they throw water on things and they do hero stuff. Let the firefighters do the hero stuff. Don't be a hero like that. And with that out of the way, take a little sip here and then we'll get started into the show proper. All right. So, lots to talk about this week. I'm going to try to get right back into the swing of things, because otherwise I'll just be miserable, and God knows I do that enough as is. But we got some things that we got to talk about. At the top of the list, though, it's got to be the NDP leadership race. The NDP had their provincial council this weekend, and one of the things that they hammered out at their provincial council was the rules for the NDP leadership race. Now, the full package hasn't been released yet, but the broad strokes are out there now. We have some dates, so things are getting exciting. The race begins in earnest on February 5th. So we're just talking a couple weeks away. This thing's going pretty quick here, like a week away, I guess, technically. Now, the big question that everybody had was, what are the membership rules going to be? And we tried to address this on last week's show a little bit, where we talked about the fact that leadership races they exist for a couple of different reasons. One of them is, of course, yes, to replace a leader. Obviously, there's a certain utilitarian element to a leadership race. But one of the other pieces that's really, really important when we're talking about leadership races is they're designed to get eyeballs on the party's policies, and they're designed to sell memberships. There were some people who were speculating that in order to be able to vote in the NDP leadership race, you'd have to have your membership as of the day that Rachel Notley stepped down. And we discussed that with our cadre of insiders, and they said, yeah, there's no way. And there is no way. You can buy an NDP membership. And this isn't an ad. This is just answering the questions, because everybody was like, oh, take back Alberta. You can buy an NDP membership until April 22nd and vote in the NDP leadership race. So there's several months of membership sales, which only makes sense if you know what the priorities of any given leadership race are. Now, where this is going to be interesting, and where it's going to be interesting to see the leadership package, is how they're going to go about prevent David Parker from David Parkering. In order to be a leadership candidate, allegedly, you have to have been a member of the party as of August of last year. So, if you didn't have your NDP membership as of August of last year, no runsings for you. But if you did, then you could run in the leadership race. But it's going to cost you a little bit of money. $60,000 is the buy-in for an NDP leadership candidate, which might sound like a lot, but it's actually less than half of what the UCP leadership race fee was. So that's kind of interesting. Should be interesting to see how much more that frees up for candidates to travel the province, to try to sell the memberships, to try to get their names out there more than they already are. Obviously, there's a short list that's already being speculated on as to potential candidates. We're not going to focus on that too much tonight, just because. But the big reveal, the moment of truth, where Alberta will find out who the new leader of the NDP will be on June 22nd, 2024, just in time for the Canada Day, the Stampede, that thing that's like a mini Stampede that they do in Edmonton, the Klondike Days, K-Days, or whatever it is now. It's cute. It's cute that you guys do that. It's after the Stampede, but it's cute that you guys have that. It'll be June 22nd. So that gives the new leader of the NDP the entire summer to campaign, and it gives them access to all of the students who will be on summer break to help them campaign. So make no mistakes, the next election for the Battle of Alberta will start in earnest on June 22nd, 2024, even though the next election proper won't be probably until 2027. So welcome to perpetual campaigning, folks. It's going to be delightful. moving on from there, we got to talk about. I said we are going to talk about healthcare. We're going to talk about healthcare. We got to talk about the state of the healthcare system right now. A little while ago, the province announced that they were going to be providing $200 million for family physicians to support family physicians because family physicians are having a really rough go of making ends meet right now. Increasing cost of living and everything else, increasing overhead, all of that kind of stuff. And family doctors are burning out and they're leaving. So the UCP said, we're going to give you $200 million. The feds have given us $1 billion. They finalized a $1 billion health deal with Ottawa. The federal government's going to be giving Alberta $1 billion. And of that $1 billion, the healthcare budget, Adrienne LaGrange, Minister of Health, has said, you know what, we're going to give family doctors $200 million. And that's great and all, but it sounds like now that money isn't actually going to be showing up until April. And a recent survey that was done really kind of underscores in very stark terms just how bad things actually are in the land of family medicine right now. We're going to share a couple of slides from this survey that was done. 1 in 5 family medical practices are unlikely to be financially viable beyond 6 months. 1 in 5. So we're not just talking about there's one physician per family practice, because that's very rarely the case, especially in larger urban centers. We're talking about that entire doctor's office is not financially viable beyond 6 months. So April's going to come right at the very, very cusp of that. There's some other information in this that is not great. The anticipated timeline for changes to practice, 21% say they have to make changes to their practice within the next 3 months. 18% say they need to do it within the next 6 months. 37% say that it needs to be within the next year. Only 10% think that they can last longer than a year without major changes being made. And here's the really shocking one. Over 6 in 10 family physicians are considering moving, retiring, or making significant changes in their service in practices. 61% are saying that they're looking at leaving or retiring. Of that number, 39%, this is 39% of family physicians in the province of Alberta. 39% are looking for work in another province or country. 38% are leaving the profession or retiring sooner. 61% are looking at a change in service. They're looking at 54% are looking at a withdrawal or reduction from comprehensive care. 18% are looking at a withdrawal reduction in AISH facilities. These are stark numbers when there's a lot of people who are looking for family doctors. And there's been a few people who have said, Adrienne LaGrange of the UCP, they keep saying, hey, what's great? We have this $5 billion surplus. We're so good at money. And there's a lot of people that are saying, if you've got this $5 billion surplus, it would probably be good to chuck some of that towards the healthcare system, and particularly family doctors, because one of the things that Danielle Smith has said over and over and over again is the importance of primary care. We're going to talk about that a little bit later as well, but she said over and over again, primary care keeps people from going to the emergency room. Right now, Danielle Smith said it at her year-end, your province, your premier, your propaganda hour. She was very clear. All roads lead to the emergency room right now. Well, they do if people can't access primary care. So if 6 in 10 physicians are looking at, family physicians are looking at making major changes to their practice, might be a good time to, put a tourniquet on that bleed, perhaps. But there's no announcements that have been made. There are some other announcements coming. We're going to be talking about those too. Next up, we got some good news, which is good. The folks on AISH finally are catching some breaks. But it's important to keep these breaks in context because there's some context So on January 26th, the government announced that they were going to be changing the AISH dates back so that they were going to be a certain number of business days before the end of the month, which makes sure that everybody who's on AISH gets the money before the end of the month so that they can pay the things that they need to pay at the end of the month. That's great, right? That sounds pragmatic. It sounds reasonable. It sounds like fixing something that should have never happened in the first place. And if we remember who did it, oh, that's right. It was, in fact, the UCP. It was the UCP. It was one of the first changes that they made in 2020. They shuffled the books, if you will. They changed the AISH payment dates to outside of the end of where the fiscal year ended, which made them look like they were sitting on they'd done so well with the monies again, made them look like they'd saved a bunch of money. But basically what they had done is they had moved those payment dates and screwed a bunch of people who were on AISH. So they've fixed their very bad thing that they did. Hooray, I guess. The new schedule is going to be the first month looks a little challenging, quite frankly, because there's 41 days between payments for February. The first one will come on February 1st, 2024, and then it goes 27, 30, 32 days in between. But the most important thing is they're all coming a couple of days before the end of the month. This means that people who are on AISH will be able to make their rent payments and all of their other payments that they have to make in order to not end up, homeless and stuff. So it's good, but it's something that never had to happen in the first place because, again, this is something that the UCP broke. And it's really hard to give them sort of an attaboy when you broke it. You did this. It's like when they de-indexed AISH. They said, before the election, we're going to index AISH. We indexed it. Look, everybody, we're matching to inflation, sort of. And then after the election, they said, we're going to de-index that, and we're going to change the payment dates because we want to look like we saved some money. They have since re-indexed it, and they have now put the payment dates back. But they did the bad things first, so really not sure what the victory lap would be there. Moving on from there, we got to talk about the big government announcement that happened this week. Not sure why it was a government announcement. It's kind of a strange government announcement, given that the government doesn't actually have anything to do with it. It's kind of weird. So basically what the announcement was, Daniel Smith, Adrienne LaGrange stood up and said, hey, you know what? We've got this primary care problem. It's a huge problem. People can't see their family doctors. All roads lead to the emergency room. It's terrible. We should do something about that. But instead of us doing something about that, what about if we let Shoppers Drug Mart do something about that? What if we let Shoppers Drug Mart take care of the problem? And effectively what they announced is that Shoppers Drug Mart, not the Alberta government, Shoppers Drug Mart is making a $77 million investment in pharmacy care clinics in Alberta. So basically what they're doing is they have a private company that is going to be coming in and expanding their role in the primary care network to provide primary care, and I'm air quoting the hell out of that for our audio listeners, to provide primary care for the folks who need access to primary care. So that's a thing that happened. We like to call it profitization here on the show because, and in fact, what's happening is they're moving people to these private companies. But it gets complicated in two big ways really quickly. We got to talk about those two big ways because the first way that it's complicated, and I want to be clear going into this, I'm not denigrating pharmacists, okay? Pharmacists have their area that they are skilled and talented practitioners in. No questions, no arguments, not diminishing any of that. To all the pharmacists out there, please don't come for us because you're great. We love what you do. The problem is they aren't particularly trained in diagnostic assessments. And so if people have the impression that they can go to their pharmacists to get prescribed things for conditions that they're experiencing, there's potential for real problems. How do we know? Well, it's kind of already happened. Not too long ago, there was an incident in Alberta where a pharmacist did their best. And I want to be clear, again, not denigrating the pharmacist. It's just not their area. I'll read from the story we have on the screen here. There are limitations for this pharmacist's ability to diagnose. One patient, Kelly Carter, said she came in with what she thought was a urinary tract infection. Moulter Center for Urinalysis prescribed antibiotics, telling her to follow up in several days with a telehealth doctor. So no physical exam to speak of. We've got the urinalysis. That's probably good. Takes a little while. And follow up with the doctor who will talk to you over the phone or Zoom. But I did get more pain and I went to urgent care, Carter told Goldman. It turned out Carter had a ruptured appendix. She spent 9 days in hospital after surgery. Now, this is, again, not to say, it's the pharmacist's fault. No, the pharmacist was trying to deal with something that he isn't trained particularly to deal with. Most pharmacists aren't trained in the physical assessment that's required to put a ruptured appendix on the list of a differential diagnosis when you're trying to figure out what's causing this person's pain. And it's very, very easy to look at a certain set of symptoms and go, oh, it's a certain set of symptoms, it must be this. But the problem is, it could be a lot of other things. And quite frankly, a ruptured appendix, while incredibly severe, isn't the worst possible option when we're talking about the acute abdomen. Now, again, that's not the pharmacist's area, but this is where the government of Alberta is saying, this is going to be part of our primary care network. It's our first line of healthcare. There's lots of things that pharmacists can absolutely do to play a role in a primary care network, but to present them as being part of the first line of defense is disingenuous and, quite frankly, dangerous. But it also presents a real moral and ethical problem. And this has been pointed out by a lot of physicians since the announcement was made. And that moral and ethical problem is, if you go to your doctor's office and you say, I've got this abdominal pain. It's a problem for me. Then the doctor will say, okay, well, we need to send you for some tests. I'm going to send you to maybe the emergency room, maybe an urgent care, maybe a lab, because that doctor shouldn't be able to financially benefit by sending you for tests and those tests being done. It's not how it should work. Because that would incentivize a doctor giving all kinds of tests. If a doctor had shelves of different medicines and different remedies that they could sell, that would present a major conflict of interest. Because all of a sudden, if that doctor says, hey, you know what, I'm going to sell you X, Y, and Z because this is going to solve your problems, everybody wins, hooray, there's real ethical questions that are involved there. Now, obviously, not every doctor is going to go, I'll make a fast buck, but the risk is some might. And this is exactly the model that's being set up potentially by using pharmacists to provide primary care, the assessments, and then the solutions all in one-stop shopping. It's convenient, but as we highlighted from our appendicitis story, it's also very dangerous. But it also presents this conflict of interest because now that company, whether it's the pharmacists themselves or it's the company that they're contracting with, now that company stands to benefit from the treatments that they're prescribing or providing. This is a major shift in how healthcare is being done. And it certainly should be part of the conversation. And it's pretty stunning that it's part of the conversation that Daniel Smith and Adriana LaGrange could appear to have completely just overlooked. It's almost as if they didn't do any kind of, broad consultation with Anybody else who's involved in primary care in regards to what are the potential implications and ramifications of a decision like this? Moving on from there, we got to talk about this is going to get some people fired up. I have no doubts whatsoever. News story popped this week where there are payouts coming for hundreds of Alberta healthcare workers impacted by COVID-19 vaccine rules. Now, there's not a lot of public information that we've been able to find yet on exactly who's getting what and who's getting how much, but the Coles notes is 696 Alberta Health Service and Alberta Precision Laboratories employees are set to be paid out, with some, we don't know the number, receiving as much as $5,000 for their pandemic labor interruption. This comes after a recent settlement between the Health Sciences Association of Alberta, or HSAA, and AISH. Now, there's a lot of gray area here, and there's a lot of places where people are, we've already seen some of the comments on the social media machines, where there's a lot of people who are a little frustrated, a lot of people who are a little bit angry. But it's important to realize, when we're talking about healthcare workers during the pandemic, for sure, there were some people who said, I don't want to. And there's a separate conversation to be had about that. When we have people who are working in evidence-based medicine and they're rejecting evidence-based treatments, that's a whole other conversation. But there were also people who, because of underlying medical conditions of their own, they couldn't necessarily take the vaccines. There were exemptions that not lots, but some people got during the pandemic for vaccination because of underlying medical conditions. And in some cases, those people were then told, well, you don't get to work anymore then. And that appears to be the crux of what this decision is about, but it remains to be seen. And I want to be really, really clear about that, because the details as to whether or not some of these people are people who said, I have religious issues with this, we don't know yet. So this is going to be a story that we're definitely going to be following as it plays out. Moving on from there, and this is a fun one. I've been looking forward to this one, because this picture here started making the rounds on January 23rd. And there was an explanation that was posted with it as well. For anybody who's listening to the audio version, I'm talking about the picture that was posted that appeared to be a sandwich sign that was posted at the Foothills Hospital at that time, allegedly, that was blocking off 2 handicapped spots. And the text on the sign said, reserved for Minister of Health and Deputy Minister of Health. And obviously, that's not a great look. And so we shared the picture as well. We weren't the first ones to post it. We're not taking credit. But we shared the picture as well with the question of like, wow, I mean, it would be super on brand, but bad luck. And it didn't take very long. Later on in the evening, we received a DM. This is from the DMs. And we were able to confirm that this did in fact come from the press secretary for Adriana LaGrange. And she gave us permission to share it, so we did. She said the sign was put up in error by Foothills Parking. Minister LaGrange or her ADM was not. I'm reading it as it was written. Don't get mad at me for grammar. This sign was put up in error by Foothills Parking. Minister LaGrange or her ADM was not at Foothills Hospital today, nor does the minister ever require reserved parking spots at hospitals or any other events. I read it as it's written. So that post, that from the press secretary, LaGrange wasn't there, and it was the Foothills Hospital who was in error. Okay. Well, we'll post that too, because we'll give everybody a fair shake. And then CBC ran this story, and there's some fascinating little bits in here. An email statement from the Ministry of Health reads: "A sign made by Alberta Health Services Parking Services was placed in a disabled parking stall at Foothills Medical Centre. Minister LaGrange and her health officials did not request this sign, and they do not require a reserved parking spot at hospitals or any other events." The statement concludes by noting that neither LaGrange nor the minister were at the Foothills Medical Centre on Tuesday. And this is where it gets interesting. And shortly after, AHS, who are, they used to be at least, arm's length from the government, two separate, totally different, siloed things. Shortly after, AHS emailed CBC News the very same statement. So, I guess, things that make you go, to quote the CNCA Music Factory. But here's the thing. So we shared that too, and we heard from some folks some of whom have been ministers, some of whom have been MLAs, and they said, "Oh no, we get reserved parking sometimes." So, I mean, obviously it's going to depend on the event. Obviously it's going to depend on the venue, and we're not saying that AHS or Alberta Health Services Parking didn't make a mistake. We're not saying that. It's fascinating that AHS emailed the very same, I'm reading from the CBC story, the very same statement. It's fascinating that AHS emailed that statement shortly after the government statement. That's pretty interesting. But you have to admit, it would be on brand for the UCP to do something, let's go, not particularly bright, and then immediately turn around and go, but it's AHS's fault. I mean, this is the same government where Danielle Smith was like, where were our 1,000 surge capacity beds? That clearly it illustrates she doesn't know what surge capacity is. Moving on from there. Don't worry, we're getting to the deep dive. We're doing a whole thing on the Tucker disaster. But first, we gotta take care of the small stories, the housekeeping, and hopefully we're gonna have somebody show up a little bit later to help us make a little bit more sense of these things. Let's talk about the contribution limits. So, you know what we need in times of economic hardship, when cost of living is extreme, when municipalities are charging for bags and napkins and things like that. You know what we need? We need to give the political parties more money. They're struggling with their multi-million dollars a year donations that are tax deductible. So there's new contribution limits that were announced, an increase of about $700 a year for the calendar year. Any combination of political parties, constituency associations, candidates, and leadership contestants, you can now donate up to $5,000 a year. And it is eligible for tax credit. If it's a nomination contestant, you can donate up to $4,600 a year. And that is not tax deductible. And in Alberta, where we elect our senators, but they don't get to be senators because that's not how it actually works, you can donate up to $5,000 a year. And if you donate in those exercises in futility, it is available and eligible for a tax credit because Alberta. Which brings us to the clip part of the show, because we have so many clips tonight. Brace yourselves, y'all, because there are so many clips tonight. Danielle Smith, back looking freshly tanned. We hear lovely things about Panama. Not saying those two things are connected, but, maybe they are. Danielle Smith was back this week. She made some announcements. She did some things. She attended some events. And one of those events was yesterday's Your Province, Your Premier, where she was asked a series of questions, one of which included, hey, are you going to do anything for the Coots boys? How come you haven't done anything for the Coots boys? And her answer is absolutely fascinating.
On the first one, look, guys, I mean, I've had to learn about what I can and cannot do in this position as premier. And I think we're all very influenced by what we see on American television. And American television, you've got prosecutors that are elected by the people. We don't have that here. In American television, you've got the criminal code that's at the state level. In Canada, it's at the federal level. In America, governors have the power to give amnesty. In Alberta and in our provinces, we don't. So I accept that there's certain things that I can do and certain things that I cannot do. And once these processes have begun, arrests have been made, and the prosecution is underway, it has to play itself out. I know that's an unsatisfactory answer for a lot of people who are very concerned about this, but do know that I'm just watching it along with anyone else, and there's nothing I can do to step in, I'm afraid.
I love that. I love that. That's the premier of Alberta saying, the American TV, there's just so much American TV. The American influence. This gets to be relevant later. Don't worry. The American influence is just so great. People get confused. I got confused. I watched the Law and Order, and, everybody loves the dun-dun, and I just thought that that's how everything worked, which is unbelievable, because it's literally unbelievable. In order to accept that Smith made all of those promises, you have to ignore that this is somebody who has been involved in politics, both as a commentator as well as a politician, for almost 2 decades now. She's been at this for quite some time. She was leader of the opposition for several years. She was an elected MLA for several years. And Danielle Smith would have us believe that entire time, when she was leader of the opposition, she didn't realize that there were differences in how the Canadian government system and the criminal system works from the American system? That's what we're supposed to be buying right now? I mean, there's no question that there's a lot of people who are lay people, salt of the earth folks. They don't spend a whole lot of time worrying about the structures of government. They certainly aren't people making election promises that presumably would have been researched before they were made, as any responsible person making promises would do. Most people don't fall into that category. But Danielle Smith would have us believe, hey, you know what? It's the American influence. We got to watch out for that American influence because they can be misleading. I'm just leaning into this so hard, and you got to know why. You got to know what's coming towards the end of this bit. We're gonna talk about Tucker in just a minute, but it's absolutely ridiculous that Danielle Smith would try to suggest that to anyone. But there were other questions that came up as well.
There is a convoy planned for the second anniversary of the Coutts blockade.
Well, you know what? And as long as nobody is blocking critical infrastructure and they're doing a peaceful protest, then bravo to them, right? I mean, I think the reason why it turned into such a difficult situation is that there were some cases where critical infrastructure was blocked and it was impairing trade, and there was also a large number of vehicles in Ottawa with sort of no end in sight for when it was going to be dismantled. But if there's a lot of people who want to just celebrate and remember the victory that we have by having our freedom returned, then I'm all for that. Let's just make sure that we're not inconveniencing people, and we're not blocking roads and we're not blocking borders.
The victory we have by having our freedom returned. As if the Coutts blockade was the reason that all of the healthcare protections that were put in place, that's what was going on there. I mean, that's a pretty telling statement in and of itself. But for Smith to say, bravo for them, let's not forget that when we're talking about why this commemorative thing happened, it happened because there are 4 people who are facing criminal charges, conspiracy to commit murder, I believe, because they showed up at the blockade, the illegal Coots blockade, not just with long guns. And there's some people who say, the long guns are legal, though. Technically, if that was all that it was, you'd probably be right. But if you're verbalizing plans to kill police officers, you'd be less right. If you've got handguns, you'd really be less right, because anyone who knows anything about firearms ownership, not only in the province of Alberta, but in the country of Canada, knows you can't just be moving your handgun from point A to point B. To move a handgun is actually an incredible process. But there were also, allegedly, pipe bombs found as well. Now, the amount of misinformation that's been going on around this whole case is really quite remarkable. We had a couple people who tried to send us news stories being like, but look, this is the picture and it's from 2021 and here's the news story. And then you look up that news story. No, that's not the picture at all. Somebody just photoshopped it for you. There's a lot of people who are comfortable lying. But to present people who brought handguns and pipe bombs and body armor to an illegal border blockade and who voiced, allegedly, that they were going to shoot the cops if they needed to call that a victory of our freedoms? I don't even know what words to use to describe that. But then came, you'd think, we've hit on 2 pretty good bombshells. That's got to be those are the worst things that Danielle Smith could have possibly said in her episode of Your Province, Your Premier. Oh, but you'd be wrong.
When it comes to the balancing of parental rights with the with kids growing into adulthood, I mean, I don't think that there's anything wrong with parents wanting to protect their child's innocence as long as possible on issues of sexuality. I think that that's a good instinct. But kids do get to a point where they start making their own decisions. And so that's the balance that we're trying to get to, is how do we make sure that we're supporting children as they grow into adults to become the people they want to be, but making sure that the parents also have the right to ensure that materials and education and exposure to some of these discussions happen at an age-appropriate level. So we'll be releasing. We've been having a lot of conversations about this as a caucus, and we've consulted very broadly about it. And so we'll be releasing policy on this next week. And I'm really hopeful that we can depoliticize the discussion and be thinking about the kids who are listening to us as adults, talking about these issues that are impacting them, and make sure that we get the right balance. So you'll see more about that next week.
So Danielle Smith is going to be introducing a parents' rights policy. Now, this is where things get really complicated really quickly. First of all, let's take a moment to remember there's no such thing really as parents' rights in Canada. Parents are the custodians of their children's rights. Pretty much, period. The notion of parents' rights, where does that come from again? Oh, right, it's imported from the United States. Hey, didn't you just do a whole bit about how dangerous that can be, Danny? But the reality is when we're talking about parents' rights, what we're talking about is legislation that's been introduced in other provinces where they've had to invoke the notwithstanding clause. And the notwithstanding clause happens when a provincial government says, okay, so we're just going to go ahead and violate someone's charter rights. We're going to go ahead and do that for this thing. It's got a 5-year expiry. Alberta has a great history of doing it because we did it to prevent gay marriage. So it wouldn't be the first time that we've done something incredibly bigoted and short-sighted in order to appease a small but vocal minority. We could do that. It would be on brand for this province. But it's important to realize how incredibly dangerous this legislation could potentially be. Because first of all, we're talking about an incredibly small number of kids. who are going to school, who are openly, particularly, this is the crux of the whole issue, this is the lever that everybody's pulling on, particularly when we're talking about trans kids. There's just not that many trans kids who are living out there, mostly because of the amount of bigotry and vitriol that gets thrown their way. So we're talking about a pretty small group. Now, I've said it before on the show, and I'll say it again. If you, as a parent, have failed to build a relationship of trust with your child where they don't feel safe coming to you and saying, hey, mom or dad, I'm kind of working my way through some stuff here. I'm a little confused. I was hoping for some guidance and support. Could you maybe not beat me or throw me out of the house? If you haven't built that kind of relationship with your kid, the failure is not your child's, it's yours, period. And I will continue. There's lots of people who have said, I don't know if I agree with you on that. That's fine. I don't care. You're wrong. That's the role of a parent, is to build that relationship with their kids, to build that trust with their kids. And if you fail to do so to the point where the only place that kid feels like they can be their authentic selves is at school, that's on you. It's not on the schools. Deal with it. That being said, Danielle Smith claims that she's consulted broadly for what this new legislation that would be introduced. Well, who has she consulted very broadly with? Because the weekend's been, since she made this announcement on her radio show, the weekend has been pretty enlightening, let's say. The Alberta Teachers Association has come out and said, we have not been advised or consulted by the Premier, Minister, or government officials about any proposed policy regarding parental or children's rights. Broad consultations on policies affecting the operation of schools must include the teaching profession. You would think. Dr. Christopher Wells, who is a long-standing, incredible advocate, came out and said, consulted with whom? Certainly not any members of the LGBTQ2S plus community. Sorry, 2S LGBTQ plus community. I want to read it like he wrote it. Any policy that harms 2S LGBTQ plus youth and violates their rights will end up in court. The Premier will need to invoke the notwithstanding clause to override basic human rights. Focus on the real issues. Brandy Rye, who is the president of the Alberta Schools Council Association, came out and said, where, when, how have parents been broadly, heavily consulted related to parental rights? Why are they being framed as rights versus responsibilities? Show the public the data related to these consultations, then broaden the consultation process before any policy, if any, is presented. So, to be crystal clear, the biggest stakeholders who would be involved in any conversation like this have no awareness of any consultation that has gone on. But the Premier of the province apparently is preparing to announce policy that could result in Alberta invoking the notwithstanding clause, which we last did to bar gay marriage in this province, based on consulting with we don't know who. It's going to be fascinating to see who she rolls out at the presumable press conference to try to justify this nightmare. And I'm going to go ahead and say it. When she makes this announcement that she has not discussed with the ATA, that she has not discussed with the Alberta Schools Council Association, that she has not clearly consulted with any of the major organizations from the LGBTQ2S plus community, we are going to see a display of tokenism that is going to be just gross. Because that's the only kind of consultation that she could have possibly done. But speaking of just gross, that wasn't the only speaking engagement that Danielle Smith was involved in this week. She had a couple other ones that she did. because we had an American come to town in the province of Alberta. We made that graphic. We're very proud of it. If you're listening to the audio version, you should at least go back and look for the graphic because we think we crushed it pretty good. Danielle Smith spoke twice. Tucker Carlson. Brace yourselves because we're about to get into it in a big way, folks. We're going to play an audio clip. Now, it's important to highlight the audio clip that we're about to play for you is from the Edmonton speech. She spoke for a whopping 7 minutes in Edmonton. So she had her little thing here in Calgary, and then they filmed it all, and then she went up to Edmonton for a surprise speech of 7 minutes and change. And she had some fascinating thoughts, and we're gonna. This is where we get into let's fact check this whole shit show because there's so many lies.
Now than ever that we think critically and we hear out various viewpoints and we engage in debate, because in today's world, cancel culture has not only censored people, but people are actively censoring themselves over the fear of being canceled. And I know there are many people, including the mainstream media. CBC was in Calgary today. I'm not sure if they had the courage to show up here tonight. But they've expressed concern or dissatisfaction at me participating in Tucker's Alberta events. And I challenge these folks to remember that as a society, whether it be a politician, the media, or any one of us inside this room, we have a vital role in bringing people together to discuss difficult and controversial ideas. Now, you know what the left wants to do? The left wants safe supply. They want to trap people in their addiction. They're now even talking about giving fentanyl to minors in British Columbia as a safe supply without even telling parents. Well, I'm here to tell you there's no such thing as a safe supply of fentanyl or heroin or cocaine.
We're still doing that, apparently. We're still doing that. There's no such thing as a safe supply of fentanyl. Okay, then, let's get into it. First of all, Danielle Smith, she spent a good amount of time talking about the importance of, hey, you know what? We have to welcome opposing viewpoints. We have to have debate. We have to be willing to hear anything. And then she launches into an attack on the left. Now, it's important to realize that when we're talking about safe supply, as we've talked about on multiple previous issues, when we're talking about harm reduction, as we've talked about on multiple previous episodes, when we're talking about these things, we're not talking about political leanings. We're talking about evidence-based medicine, period. We had the whole conversation with Ewan Thompson from Drug Data Decoded, where we talked about the recent study that came out that showed that when it comes to forced treatment, 4% of people were successfully treated. 96% people relapsed within 2 months. Guess forced treatment doesn't work. That's just one study, but there's lots of them that demonstrate the exact same thing. Same with safe supply. People's disagreement with safe supply is not based on evidence. It is based on ideology. So to try to frame the left wants to introduce fentanyl to kids. My God, could you imagine? You'd have to, because it's not really true at all in the way that it's been talked about. And we're going to take a second to talk about it. So where does this whole thing come from? Where does this whole idea that we've seen repeated at length, the BC wants to give fentanyl to kids, they just want to hand it out like pop rocks, I guess. Where does that come from? Well, it comes from a news editorial. I'm not sure exactly what to call it. We had a little bit of run-in of the author of this article. His name is Adam Zivo. He tried to beak at us a little bit on the Twitter machine. And we said, well, if you want to come on the show, you're more than welcome to. And he said, well, okay, I will come on the show. And then we said, okay, let us know when. And he said, la, la, la. And then we went back to him and said, hey, no, but seriously, if you want to have a real conversation about this, we would love to have a real conversation with you. And he said, la, la, la. He's a writer for a publication. And he has had a major axe to grind with the idea of safe supply. The headline from his article that all of this rhetoric is based on, Adam Zivo, BC plans to give safer supply fentanyl to minors and parents won't have a say. Now, the subheading starts to get a little bit more closer to the truth. There's no minimum age listed in protocols for providing youth with taxpayer funded, and then we call it recreational fentanyl. Where does this come from? Where are these? What are these protocols? What is this? We're giving recreational fentanyl to the kids come from? Well, they come from a prescribed safer supply protocols that are specific to the proviso of prescription fentanyl. Now, this is a safer supply program. And it's a set of protocols that were developed at the request of the government of British Columbia to say, hey, if we're going to provide safe supply, if we're going to provide prescription fentanyl to people who are using fentanyl anyways, how do we provide that fentanyl? How do we provide that prescription fentanyl? What do the rules look like? And it's quite a lengthy document. And there's some important pieces that we got to look at. The first one has to do with who's even eligible for the program, because that sets some really important context. So, the following considerations for eligibility should be assessed and documented in the participant's health record. Active opioid use disorder diagnosis. So this has to be somebody who is addicted to opioids. And they have to have ongoing, active, unregulated fentanyl use. So they are relying on a street supply of opioids, which has been demonstrated time and time again to be profoundly toxic and one of the biggest reasons that people die from drug poisonings. And they have to be at high risk of overdose, injection-related harms, or other harms related to the use of unregulated opioids via detailed clinical assessment, including overdose history. So, what does the assessment have to look like? They have to have active substance use assessment. They have to have substance use and treatment history. They have to have a history of overdose and other drug-related harms. So criminalization is the one that's used there. They have to have a history of injection-related harms, comorbid mental and physical health conditions, prescribed and non-prescribed medications. They have to have a urine drug test within the last 2 weeks. That shows that they are using fentanyl. They have to have baseline liver and renal function tests completed within the last 3 months in reviews. They have to review the potential precautions, and they have to review the potential contraindications. What's the first contraindication? No history of opioid use. The second one, opioid non-tolerance, as demonstrated by a negative urine drug test and no past history of this sort of therapy. If they have opioid use disorder without fentanyl use, that is a contraindication. If they have any hypersensitivity, if they have any disabling medical or mental health condition that precludes the safe participation. If they're pregnant, there's a whole list of things that right out of the gates say you have to demonstrate that you have an active fentanyl addiction. You are in the throes of an active fentanyl addiction. You are on the streets seeking fentanyl. That's who this program is for. And when we start to talk about the minors piece, here's where Mr. Zivo gets his knickers all in a knot. Because one of the precautions for the program, if any of the precautions are identified during the assessment process, they should be documented, and a second prescriber should review. So the first physician who's looking at all of this and potentially prescribing it, if they identify any of these things, they have to go, okay, I need somebody else who does this same thing to take another look and to give their approval as well. So there's a whole nother level of practitioner at place here. The second prescriber review, discussion, and final decision should be documented. What's the very first thing? Youth less than 19 years of age. Now, there is no, well, we shouldn't give it to 6-year-olds. But again, let's go to the inclusion criteria, or the things that somebody has to demonstrate that they're doing to even be considered for this program. They have to be in the throes of an active fentanyl addiction. A lot of 6-year-olds running into that problem, Adam? Kind of doubtful. So what Mr. Zivo has done is he's presented a partial view of what this program is. And he's locked on to the one fact that they don't have an exclusionary low age. But here's the question that you have to be asking. If there's a 14-year-old kid who is in the throes of an active fentanyl addiction, and they meet all of the other criteria that I just listed off, would you rather that kid continue to access a toxic supply that's on the streets of BC and, quite frankly, Alberta, that's killing people? Or would you rather them be able to manage their addiction using a safer supply? Now, of course, unsupervised use of fentanyl is always going to carry dangers. Unsupervised use of any substance is going to carry dangers. Unsupervised use of alcohol is going to carry dangers. But the equivalent would be to say, hey, you know what? There's this 13-year-old kid, and he's been going out to the hills, and he's getting his moonshine from this guy. He might be mixing in some battery acid. We don't know. But rather than let him access something safely and maybe get plugged into some services, we should not. We should just not. Keep him in the moonshine battery acid. Think about the things that I listed off at the beginning there. All of the different criteria that are required for somebody to even access this program. Does that sound like a kid whose parents are super engaged anyways? Because it doesn't to me. Under 19 years of age. It's pretty straightforward. There's not going to be a whole lot of kids accessing that program, if any. And it's incredibly harmful to have a reductionist approach and just fixate on one little thing in order to try to destroy a program that could very easily save a lot of lives. And that's what the evidence says. And it's not an issue of left or right. That's what the science is. And if our political spectrum has gotten so messed up that left now means I accept science, we got some real big problems with how the Daniel Smith, at least, is defining the right. But we have more that we need to talk about because, like I said, those comments were made at the opening of the Tucker Carlson Sworn Enemy Tour, is what he called his little sojourn into Alberta. God bless him. And there's some things that we got to talk about with the Tucker thing. First of all, a lot of people have already said this. For the Premier of Alberta, given Tucker Carlson's history, we talked about this on our last episode, the guy has been caught saying, you know what, I will lie to my audience to make money. I'm paraphrasing, but when we take a look at the whole Dominion lawsuit and the text messages that were released through there, that's what he said. So if we're talking about a credible source of debate, Tucker Carlson ain't it. And we're going to spend the next half hour showing you exactly how. Because Tucker did publicly release his speeches. Now, Danielle Smith has defended her choice to appear on Tucker Carlson's hate rally. I don't know. Some people called it that. Temper tantrum, maybe. I don't know. By saying, well, Tucker's got this great, big, huge audience. There's so many people who listen to him. Most of them are Americans. And you just said on your radio show that American information is part of the problem that we have in Canada. So, okay, but choices, whatever. So we're going to go through a couple of the tips, the insights that Mr. Carlson had for engaging in constructive debate.
Effective as a political movement or a resistance movement, which effectively you are, if you don't laugh at your enemies. Because not only are they evil, and they are, they're also ludicrous. They're ludicrous. And it's really important to say that because it saps their power immediately. Laughing at somebody, and if you're a married man, you know that, no, it's true. Your wife could come and hit you in the face with a 2x4, and that would be less painful than having her laugh derisively at you, particularly when you get out of the shower. That would just end it for you. That would end it. Your male power would evaporate like a puddle on a hot day, like you'd be done. Because it has that effect. And so to look at your enemies, like let's say you had some sort of weird prime minister like to dress up in fussy costumes. It would be super important to point that out a lot. Like relentlessly. Somebody told me last night that his base, I was asked, we had this wonderful dinner last night with two of the most famous people in Canada, probably the two most famous people, Lord Black and my friend Dr. Jordan Peterson, and I asked, like, is there anyone in the country who supports this guy? He's so, I mean, I know him only, I've never met him, I only know him through television. I know his cousin Gavin Newsom pretty well, but I don't know him. Is there anyone who takes him seriously? And everyone in the room said, oh, yeah. Young people, particularly young women, take him very seriously. They love him. And I thought, there's really only one way to combat that, and that's by pointing out what an absurd poser this guy is. He's like a ridiculous figure. Like, you should dislike and resist Justin Trudeau and his government to the maximum extent of your ability. But before you do that, you should just laugh at him until you can't breathe. Seriously. The guy's like, he's showing up for a costume party when no one else is. There's no costume party, and there's Justin Trudeau. Like speaking as some sort of moral voice. Weird little cross-dresser. So anyway, that's my first piece of advice.
So we've got the homophobia well in there. Not necessarily homophobia. I guess transphobia would probably be the better word with the weird little cross-dresser comment. But this is the tone and the tenor. And I should probably say we've got like 15 minutes worth of Tucker Carlson clips that we're going to wade our way through because it's important to understand what he says. It's important to understand what he's feeding people. And by extension, Premier Smith, by sharing a stage with him on both of these presentations, is providing to people, is legitimizing for people. So in this first clip, we have Tucker Carlson saying, hey, you know what? These people are your enemies and they're evil. If people disagree with you, they're your enemies and they're evil. I'm not paraphrasing. These people are your enemies and they're evil. It's right at the beginning of the clip. So the Tucker Carlson approach to reasonable debate appears to be dehumanize people as much as possible. Let's make anybody who disagrees with us our enemies, and let's make sure that everybody understands that they're evil. This isn't just a debate of ideas. This is a titan clash between good and evil. That's how we're framing the conversation. That's how we're starting the Tucker Carlson presentation. But don't worry, because it gets way worse.
That aren't in fact perspectives, they're attacks on you. And that's the main thing that I want to say in the short time allotted today, is that you should recognize what is happening to you. This is not a political debate to which you've been invited to participate. This is a destruction of you and your culture and your beliefs and your children and your future as a country. And that's not overstatement. It's provable statistically. So just take 3 steps back. If you have a government that is giving fentanyl to your children, as they are in BC, I notice your premier has a no fentanyl to kids policy, God bless her. I know, and you're applauding. I mean, and I'm applauding, and I'm grateful. But how distorted is your world where you have to applaud the one politician's like, we're not going to give fentanyl to the kids today. Okay? But then take 2 steps further back from that and ask yourself, if someone's giving fentanyl to your children, what's kind of the message of that? Well, they're trying to kill your children, obviously. Fentanyl? It's the number 1 cause of death under 40 in the United States. Number 1 in the whole country. Followed by suicide. If you want to know where we are, we're about 2 years behind you. And it's only because we have a louder media space than you do that we aren't ahead of you. But if someone's giving fentanyl to your children without telling you, they're trying to kill your children, which are your inheritance, so the only meaningful thing you will ever produce on earth, okay, are your children.
That's a fascinating way to define human value. You're only of any worth if you've ever had kids. If you haven't, maybe you're infertile. You're worthless. But the greater problem, or another problem, is probably a better way to say that, with Tucker's little rant there, is if people are giving fentanyl to kids, they're trying to kill kids. When, if he actually had a clue what he was talking about, and he understood that this is literally a safer supply program that's designed to save lives. And if Tucker actually looked at what the leading cause of death was for people under 40, it's not just fentanyl, it's the toxic supply. America is the one country in the world that quite possibly is the last country in the world that should be leading or trying to lead the conversation on how to deal with drugs. Their war on drugs has thrown more money down the toilet than almost any of their endeavors, and it has had no perceivable effect on whether or not people want to use drugs. So to try to use American statistics as an example, where in many states, very recently, and in some you still can, go to jail for marijuana, which is legal entirely across Canada. Must drive Tucker nuts. Don't worry, it does. He gets to that later. But the notion that anybody who's giving fentanyl to kids could only possibly be doing so to try to kill kids is again dehumanizing, again misinformed. And then he got into MAID.
Killing 50,000 of your citizens if the government is doing that through the MAID program. And a lot of them are not actually terminally ill, they're just sad. And the government is encouraging them to submit to being killed by the government and then won't release the recent statistics. Like, what is that? What is that? Yeah, it's genocide. That's exactly what it is. It's killing large groups of people. And who are those people, by the way? We don't know because your government hasn't released the stats. What percentage of those were born in Canada? I'd bet right around 100%. So if you're a government, you have the duty to your citizens, people who are from here, people whose ancestors built the place, not exclusively to them, but primarily to them, to your citizens. Like, why else do you exist except to serve your citizens? And if you're targeting your citizens, how many people who arrived in Canada in the last 10 years have opted into the MAID program? I don't know the answer. I'd bet around 0. It's all people who are from here. And now the government brags, oh, we're saving money because they died. That's the darkest thing I can imagine. And I bet there's 0 conversation about that in this country because I know this country and I know what it's like. It's too horrible. No one wants to talk about it. You should talk about it. But more than anything, you should internalize the message of that, which is they hate me. They hate me to the point they're willing to kill me, which they are.
Nope, that's not what happens at all. He's just lying. The implication that there were 50,000 people who were killed through MAID, and most of them were just sad is not only incredibly dismissive, but it's patently false. And if Tucker had bothered to do a cursory Google search before he decided to get up on stage and lie to people, he would know that mental health isn't being considered for MAID until 2024, March of 2024. But let's take a look at what the federal criteria are for MAID right now to maybe get a little bit of accuracy, a little bit of context, because it's certainly lacking in Tucker's little diatribe there. So as of March 17th, 2021, persons who wish to receive MAID must satisfy the following eligibility criteria. They must be 18 years of older and have decision-making capacity. They must be eligible for publicly funded healthcare services. They make a voluntary request that is not the result of external pressure. They give informed consent to receive MAID, meaning that the person has consented to receiving MAID after they have received all information needed to make this decision. They have a serious and incurable illness, disease, or disability, and again, excluding a mental illness until March 17th, 2024. They have to be in an advanced state of irreversible decline in capability, and they have to have enduring and intolerable physical or psychological suffering that cannot be alleviated under conditions the person considers acceptable. But Tucker Carlson would have you believe that the vast majority of people who are accessing MAID are doing so because they're sad. Now, we looked and we couldn't find any record of the government of Canada taking a victory lap over how much money that they were saving by having people access MAID, which is, to be clear, something that person chooses of their own volition. What we were able to find, the overwhelming majority of people who are accessing MAID are not accessing it because they're sad, because again, that's not even a possibility. They're accessing it because they are dealing with terminal cancer. Now, there are lots of, and MAID is a heavily emotional issue, no question about it. But the fundamental principle behind MAID is that it is an evidence-based way to alleviate inevitable suffering. There's no other choices for this person other than you're going to have all of the suffering or not. And there's no right or wrong choice. To be clear, nobody has any business saying to another human being, oh, you know what, you absolutely should have to choose the suffering. And nobody has any business saying to another human being, oh, you know what, you should absolutely choose the medical assistance in dying. Nobody has the right to force another person on that. And it's written right into the protocols that exist for accessing the MAID program. But it's worth noting, in Canada, you have to be 18 years of age. Now, there are some universities and some hospitals that have said, hey, for people who have interminable, intractable, painful, inevitable conditions that are going to result in death, is this something that should maybe we have a conversation about in regards to pediatrics? That's a big conversation, but the most important thing about that conversation is it's not happening. But Tucker's doing something else in this clip that's really important to start to highlight because he's using some classic Fox News language. He's saying in there, hey, you know what? I don't know how many people are accessing the MAID program. I'm sure it's all people who were born in Canada, though. I'd bet. I have no evidence whatsoever to make this claim, but I'm going to speculate, regardless of what the consequences might be, I'm going to speculate that the number of people who access MAID in Canada are 100% people who were born in Canada. And I'm going to speculate, with no evidence whatsoever, that the people who aren't accessing it, there's never been anyone who wasn't born in Canada. He's setting the stage for another argument. And he's using a very manipulative, some might argue evil, method to get people emotionally fired up, to prime them for his argument. But before we get to that real argument, He's got some other points he wants to make.
Of your most basic civil liberties, not the ones granted to you by the crown, but the ones granted to you by God. And those would include the freedom of speech, which is inalienable. It cannot be taken from you no matter who is in Ottawa. It doesn't matter who's in the Prime Minister's office. Your rights remain the same because you were born with them, because you are not a slave, you're a human being, and you have inherent dignity because God made you. That's just a fact. And if they're taking those rights away piecemeal and doing so in the name of public safety, even as they make the public sphere much more dangerous, which they have, in case you haven't noticed, Canada has a lot more violent crime now than it did 20 years ago. Have you noticed? Of course you have. You live here. And if they're telling you you can't defend yourself against that crime, we're going to disarm you, you can't protect your life or your family, and you're like, oh yeah, it's for the public safety, it's just not a big deal. These are weapons of war. No, they're weapons of self-defense, which you need and deserve as a free person, not a slave. And then they're telling you you can't complain about it. And then they're subsidizing the media to the point where all of your big media outlets, which are disgusting, are state media because they're taking state cash. Do you watch CBC? I do, occasionally. I can turn in any hour of the day and I will learn that I am racist for driving an SUV and not being trans. That's the whole schedule of CBC programming. But interpret that. That's not woke. Oh, it's woke. I hate the woke crap. It doesn't mean anything. They hate you. That's what they're saying. They're saying that you are bad. That's exactly what they're saying. Don't lie to yourselves. That's all I'm saying.
They hate you. You are bad. Anybody who disagrees with you, they hate you, and they're saying that you're bad. Now, Tucker managed to throw in another couple of transphobic comments in there, because we got to stay on theme, right? But there's some other pieces that are really important, because, again, we're talking about the Americanization of Canadian politics. It talks about freedom of speech. It's a God-given right. All of your rights, they're God-given. If you're atheist, I guess, I don't know how that works. If you're not Judeo-Christian, that's probably complicated too. But they're God-given rights. That's all that really matters. They're God-given rights. Nobody can take them away from you unless, I guess, they choose to invoke the notwithstanding clause here in Canada. But that's a whole other thing. He talks about the weapons of war. So right there, he's talking about, we're not talking about firearms control. We're talking about you should be able to have whatever guns you want. Not only is it your right, but you deserve them. I'm not sure what somebody does to deserve, I don't know, a fully automatic weapon. I don't know where the distinction is in Tucker's mind. But I don't know what you do to deserve that. I know what it is. Jordan Peterson was there. So if you make your bed properly enough times, then you get the automatic assault weapons. That must be what it is. Now, it is worth noting, Tucker seems to have some really strong feelings about any organization, any media organization that takes state cash. We'll come back to that in a week or two. But of course, he's got more to go. And he's working his way to the main point that he wants to make fairly quickly here.
So if they're limiting your freedom to say what you think, which is the freedom of conscience, the most basic of all freedom, your freedom to defend yourself and your family against bodily harm, which has got to be a twin to the first one, if they're taking away your voting power by changing the population of your country, which they are doing, and no one wants to talk about that, Canada has the highest immigration rate in the world per capita. And shut up, racist! That's not racist. I don't care if they're coming from New Zealand. I don't care if you're taking the population of Stockholm and moving them to Canada. If you change the population of the country, you change the country. And you dilute the voting power of the people who are vested in that country, the people who are born there, who have lived there long term, who understand the history and the culture of the country, who are bought in. And all of a sudden, their vote means much less. It's math. You guys do that. Math. That's horrifying that this is happening. And there's no public debate over it whatsoever. Why do you think that's happening? Is it for economic reasons? I'd be kind of okay with that. If someone could stand up and say, we're totally changing the population of Canada because we think it's better for our economy. Okay, tell me how. We can have rational conversations. We're adults. I'm a citizen. This is my government too. Tell me how that works. But they can't, because that's not true. Look at your housing prices. Look at the strain on your services. Look at your healthcare system, which no Canadian I meet brags about anymore. And one of the main reasons is it's overburdened. There are too many people. Oh, we need population growth. Really? Tell me why. Tell me why all of these slogans make sense. I've watched Canadian hockey from time to time. They literally say diversity is our strength before they open the game. Okay, what does that mean and why is it true? Shut up! No, I'm not going to shut up. You're telling me to accept a slogan, so it's incumbent on you to explain what the slogan means and why it makes sense. That seems like a common sense rule. If you're forcing something down my throat, tell me how it tastes before I swallow it. Oh, shut up, racist. No, not going to. Not racist. I'm not going to shut up. Answer the freaking question, you weird cross-dressing Prime Minister.
There we go with the cross-dressing jokes again. Can't stop with those for too long. Otherwise, people won't remember the point. You see, it's all about repetition and apparently replacement theory. What Tucker Carlson just espoused there and what he was referring to with his whole, MAID, 100% of people who are accessing MAID, they've got to be natural-born Canadians. And, yeah, but no, not natural-born Canadians or immigrants are accessing MAID. So they're using MAID as a way to kill you. They're using MAID to decrease the population of the real Canadians. And they're also allowing all of these immigrants in. It's diluting the culture. It's diluting the voting pool. Give me one good reason why we should be letting all of these immigrants in here. I don't know. Tax base, maybe? I'm just spitballing, but I think I could come up with one off the cuff. Because all of those people who are coming to Canada and who are working in all of the jobs are paying taxes on that. If you want to pin the degradation of the healthcare system on anyone, you can't pin it on the people that are paying their taxes. You have to pin it on the people who are spending those taxes. Tucker Carlson stood up on the stage. Now, this is the Calgary one. We haven't gotten to the Edmonton one yet. We're going to. Like I said, this is a long haul tonight. Bear with me. Tucker Carlson is standing on stage. Danielle Smith sat down with him after and didn't challenge him on any of these points. Tucker Carlson is standing on stage saying the biggest problem with Canada right now is Canada's being diluted by immigrants. He's espousing replacement theory. There's no way around it. He's trying to use MAID as a supplementary argument to replacement theory. That's what he wants to talk about. And it's not even so much about the replacement theory, replacing Canadians. There's a very particular demographic that he seems to be particularly concerned about because it's the only one that he brought up as being a target.
What you're doing to your Christians. And I say this for a couple of, I am a Christian, but that's not why I'm telling you this. I'm telling you this because there's kind of no more inoffensive and peaceful group in the world than the Christians. In fact, there isn't. Their religion tells them, commands them to turn the other cheek and to put the concerns of others above their own concerns. So if you have a problem with those precepts, explain it to me. Speak slowly so I can understand. I think every person in this room, regardless of your faith, can agree, yeah, I'm for that. I wish I was more like that. That's good. We need more of those people in society. Serve others for the sake of service. People who pray for their enemies. Who does that? Who would pray for an enemy? No one, except the Christians, and they do. They're commanded to. So if you're hassling that group, maybe you've got another agenda that we should be concerned about, even if we're not in that group. If we burn 90 of their churches to the ground, and the prime minister and his little weird buddies are endorsing that, burning churches, if you're on the side of burning churches, let me just say, I don't need any other facts of the case, you're on the wrong side. If you're throwing preachers in prison for preaching the Christian gospel, not for hurting anyone, not for making pipe bombs, not for trying to castrate other people's children, not for importing millions of people into your country who are not going to have work, just for the crime of preaching the Christian gospel, you go to jail. At the same time, when they're encouraging your kids to do drugs, and not just fentanyl, but weed, don't raise your hand if you have a 15-year-old son, but come up to me after and tell me what you think of legalized weed. For real. And if you have a 15-year-old son, you know exactly what I'm talking about. They did that to you and to your son on purpose. And so in a country like that, in a world like that, if you think that preaching the gospel is so dangerous that the people who do it need to be in prison in shackles, you're serving someone other than the people of Canada, if you know what I mean.
Oh, he's talking about the devil, he is. He's saying you serve the devil. I think I know what he means. But let's take a look at what whoops, let it slip there, didn't I? Let's take a look at what Tucker's talking about there, because he says, the Christians, they're so wonderful. It's not like they've ever been violent or traveled to other lands to try to exterminate people. It's not like the Crusades were a Christian endeavor. No, that's not what that was about. Hey, there's never been a problem with Christians and racism and violence. There's never been like a Ku Klux Klan thing that was imported from the States to Alberta too. We did that a while ago too, didn't we? Yeah, so here's the problem. As soon as you start to talk about any group as a monolith, you run into all kinds of problems, because there's always going to be examples in any group of assholes who use that religion and that faith to leverage their own power. That happens in literally every organization. That's just a thing that happens. So if you want to start to make blanket statements about any group, you've kind of already disqualified yourself a little bit. But let's talk about the churches, because there was so many churches that were burned down and Justin Trudeau celebrated it. Nope, that's not what happened. He actually quite clearly, he condemned it. He called it unacceptable and wrong on July 2nd, 2021 from this news story here. Unacceptable and wrong. Trudeau condemns attacks on churches. So again, Tucker's just lying. He's lying to his audience because he can make money. It's kind of a theme. And then he gets into the pastors, and he tries to frame the pastors who were imprisoned at the peak of COVID for violating health measures, not for preaching the gospel, not for spreading the good word of Christianity and taking care of their neighbors, not for any of that. They violated the public health orders. There were lots of churches and there were lots of religious organizations that said, you know what, we're going to do this via Zoom. We're going to do this via Facebook Live. We're going to make sure that people can still hear the gospel, that we can still spread the gospel, or whatever their particular religious flavor was. There were lots of people who did that. And then there were the assholes who decided that they were going to put themselves above everybody else. It was the people who were arrested weren't arrested because of their religious leanings. They were arrested because they couldn't follow the basic rules that were put in place to keep their neighbors safe. They couldn't do it. It wasn't about the gospel. But Tucker frames it that way because then, look, everybody who's Christian is just a big victim of the big bad Justin Trudeau who celebrates the burning of churches even though he doesn't. But his lack of homework, in particular, starts to really shine through towards the end of his speeches.
How much they dress it up in the passive-aggressive, self-help language of the modern left, Well, it's really about public safety. Every time I turn on your freaking television shows, everything's about public safety, which is a euphemism for hard-edged fascism, actually. And frankly, I'm a little bit more comfortable with the old-fashioned variety, where guys in tight uniforms goose-step through your town, because at least you know who you're fighting. And you know what it's going to take to liberate your town. Get rid of these people and everything will be okay. But when they show up and they're therapists with advanced degrees, and they look at you in the face and say, no, actually, little Dylan just needs more fentanyl. Little Dylan's actually a girl. And we're going to, yes, he's a girl. Sorry, she's a girl. She's a girl. And if you don't agree, well, maybe we may have to remove Dylan to more care-affirming custody. Oh, you're going to take my kids away because I don't want to castrate them. They'll never say that, of course. Because clear language is their enemy. Because clear language exposes who they really are. They're not people who are trying to help you. They are people who are trying to hurt you. Anyone who goes after your children, anyone who encourages you to have fewer children, is trying to make you extinct. It's literally that simple. And it's only in the advanced West that we don't see that. Try that crap in Bulgaria. Try that in Serbia. How do you think that would fly in Serbia? We're just going to give little Voldak some fentanyl. And we think, he may be, you wouldn't even get to the next sentence before you got shot. Because you're trying to kill someone's kids. And your average Serb, whatever you think of them, doesn't have generations of therapy talk that acts as a logical intermediary in his brain and prevents him from seeing what's actually going on here. They're trying to kill my kids. I'm the father. I won't allow it. I'll lay my life down to prevent it. It's literally that simple.
So, public safety is just another term for hard-edged fascism, is it? Whoops. Didn't really think that one through. Didn't really take a look at the roster of the province that you were coming to. Did you, there, Tucker? Because we've got a minister, that premier that you love so much. She actually made a minister of public safety. So, what do you suppose that means, Tucker? What else has happened in the name of public safety in this province? Yes. We needed to clean up the streets to reduce the violent crime. Mike Ellis talked about the importance of public safety and the have to make sure that public safety gets rid of the homeless encampments, despite the fact that human rights groups sued the city of Edmonton over encampment clearing because they were concerned about the violation of human rights. And then can we also just talk for a quick second about Tucker's odd little end there where he talks about try that in Serbia? Because that's a call to violence. What he's saying is, if you were to do this in any other country in the world, if somebody was to say, hey, we should look at safe supply in any other country in the world, they would just be shot. And then he says, by extension, that's pretty much okay because that's what any responsible parent would do. They would just shoot that person. This type of rhetoric is extraordinarily dangerous, especially when you frame it within the context of all the other things that he said. They're your enemies. They're evil. Now, there's a lot of rational people that would hear that and go, oh, I don't know about that. But there are some other people who have been radicalized. And this type of language, when they hear that, is extraordinarily dangerous. And that was just Calgary. So, as a precursor, before we get into the Edmonton shit show, I'd just like to take a quick sec to highlight the fact that he said all of these things. And then the Premier of Alberta, who wasn't scheduled to appear in Edmonton, then made a point, having heard him say all of these things, made a point to go up to Edmonton to do her little 7 minutes where she talked about the importance of rational debate, the importance of not being hyperbolic, the importance of, hey, here's this guy who embodies all of these qualities. I don't know what speech she listened to in Calgary, but she clearly felt that it was okay and she could run with it. So let's move up to Edmonton, where Tucker doubled down on a lot of his points, but he had a couple of important variations that, again, since we're fact-checking Tucker tonight, are worth pointing out.
Help, really? They're trying to help? How does it help you or your family when the government of British Columbia gives fentanyl to your children without your knowledge? That is literally happening right now. And it's been stopped by the premier here, who's not giving fentanyl to children. Amen, bravo. Hard to believe you even have to say that. But it is happening right down the road, right over the mountains in British Columbia. What is that? It's not an expression of compassion. Fentanyl is the #1 killer of people under 40 in the United States. #1. There's no safe dosage of fentanyl. It's a poison. Manufactured in Mexico with Chinese precursors designed to kill people, and it does. And so to hand that to children without their parents' knowledge is what? An attempt to kill your children. What else could it be? That's not compassion. There's no other way to read that. And I just fear if you're in the middle of a society that says that's okay, or it's on the spectrum of okay, it's something that we should consider, you may lose sight of the fact that that's not only completely unacceptable, it's a declaration of war against you and your children. People who are trying to kill your children are not your friend. They're your sworn blood enemy. Is there another way to interpret that? Am I being crazy? I don't think that I am.
Oh, no, you are. You very much are. You're very, very being crazy right now. It's literally happening in BC. It's literally not. We've already addressed that piece. Fentanyl is a poison. There's no safe dosage. It's definitely not, I don't know, 1 microgram per kilogram to a maximum dose of 100 micrograms repeated every 5 minutes to a maximum dose of 250 micrograms, because, yeah, there is a safe dosage because it's not a poison. It gets used all of the time in medical procedures, not just in Alberta or Calgary or Edmonton, but in Canada. And, oh, gasp, they use it in the United States for medical procedures too. Tucker, again, doesn't know what he's talking about, but he's happy to use hyperbolic language in order to try to fire people up and make people afraid. Because that's how Tucker gets paid. Now, Tucker talked earlier about the type of fascism that he prefers. He prefers his fascism to come with young men in tight clothing. But he doubled down on that in a really gross way in Edmonton.
Unscrupulous people in power do, if they're smart, is they don't dispatch an army of young men in tight uniforms to goose step through your town because it's a little bit too obvious. You've seen that movie. And you sort of know what happens next. You take up arms, you form a resistance, you drive the people out, and freedom returns, right? You guys have seen that movie. It's been done about 50,000 times. And oh, if only that's what we were facing. Because that is straightforward. That's the kind of masculine expression of fascism. But the West is now facing a far slyer opponent, which is the feminine expression of fascism. The Chrystia Freeland version of fascism. Yes, yes. And I know a lot about this because I knew Chrystia Freeland when she, was a journalist at the Financial Times, whose name shall forever live in infamy for employing her. And I remember even then thinking, this woman is not bright at all. But boy, does she have high self-esteem. I don't think I've ever even seen it's off this. I don't know what the self-esteem measurement scale is, the Richter scale. But her self-esteem was literally unassailable. It was bomb-proof. If a nuclear bomb dropped on your town, you could hide beneath Chrystia Freeland's self-esteem and live. There's like nothing you could do to shake it. Nothing. No amount of evidence of her stupidity and wrong decisions and idiotic views could dissuade her from the core belief that she was awesome and you were not. And I kind of stood back in admiration. So I guess I shouldn't be totally shocked that she's helping to run and destroy your country. but she's doing it in her signature way. She's not getting on the CBC, her media outlet, which like almost all outlets in this wonderful oppressed country is run by the government. It's all state media. It's Albania 1985. And I'm sure we have people whose families were refugees from Albania. Welcome, and you know what I'm talking about. But at least you could say of the Albanian leader in 1985, Enver Hoxha, that when he went full fascist, he just like didn't mince words. Shut up and obey or we'll shoot you. Chrystia Freeland is wise enough, clever enough, in her serpent-like way, to make it all about your protection and safety. All about your protection and safety. No, we're just trying to help you. That's why you're in shackles. You're being arrested right now for your safety. Oh, it's for the common good. Don't worry, you'll understand.
I mean, there's no misogynism going on in that clip whatsoever. Tucker likes masculine fascism, but the feminine fascism, the serpentine fascism, that's the bad stuff. She's not that bright. It's fascinating that Tucker Carlson is saying that women who are in government, who limit people's ability to express dissent, I don't know, like blocking them or something, and who are justifying, I don't know, tearing down people's homes by saying that it's in the interest of public safety. It's fascinating that Tucker would take that particular line of thought as he's there with the Premier of Alberta, but he revisited Maine too.
Of Canada is killing Canadians, and not just a few, and not just the terminally ill. Over 50,000 so far. 50,000. Any organization that kills 50,000 people is a genocidal organization. Period. And I don't care how you dress it up. That's just a fact. That's like a bottom line on a chart. How many people have you killed? Oh, 50,000. Oh, you're not in the good guy category. Sorry, we can't. We're gonna bring you up at The Hague, actually, where you should be. And now, under consideration, apparently next month, is a plan to expand the MAID program, the systematic killing of Canadians, not all of whom are terminally ill, many of whom are just sad, because Canadian society has made them sad. They're gonna expand that to children. And that's the point at which you have to say, I'm sorry, we're not gonna be polite anymore. You literally can't do that. And I don't care if someone, you don't need to be, by the way, a religious freak to think it's wrong for a government to kill people at scale. And I don't care, choice, they'll dress it up. No, it's totally evil, is the truth. And it's deeply revealing of who they are and what they want.
Oh, it looks like Tucker got some notes, but he screwed them up. Because, yeah, as I already said, in March of 2024, the government of Canada is going to expand the people who are eligible to MAID to include certain extreme mental health conditions. It's not just people who are sad. So, and it's certainly not kids. So he managed to conflate the March 24th changes that are going to include mental health, and he somehow thought that okay, no, but well, what if I just say that that's kids? So again, he's lying to people. Somebody clearly gave him some notes, and he clearly screwed them up. But he seems to be, again, entirely comfortable just lying to people. But as he got through the evening, he really just stopped even trying to say the quiet part quietly.
Policies formulated by people who actually loved you and had just gone off course and were doing the wrong thing, as you often do with your kids. If you have children, you often make the wrong decision with your kids. But you're brought back on course by your love for your children. And so over time, you make the right decisions because you're animated for a desire to protect them because you love them. But if you hated your children, all of your mistakes would be in one direction, and that direction would be toward destruction. And there is zero evidence that the Trudeau government loves you. And there's overwhelming evidence that they hate you and your families. How is that not true? If Liberal and NDP politicians are sending fentanyl to your children, if they're trying to add your children to the list of people who can be killed by the state, who aren't even terminally ill, if they are changing the composition of your country without asking your permission, if every communication you have with Ottawa is a lecture about your moral deficiencies, you're a bad person, shut up, racist. There's no love at all. There's only contempt.
Trudeau hates you. He's doing everything because he hates you. And because we're trying to do the replacement theory.
Have an immigration policy that makes your country stronger, your economy stronger, your country more cohesive. Amen. And you have had that for generations. And everybody in Canada is happy about that. That's not what you have now. You have the wholesale importation of millions of people into your country for no obvious benefit at exactly the time when your housing prices are so out of control. Like, can your kids afford a house? This is true in my country too. And so the question you have to ask is, why is the government doing this? Is there an economic case to be made? Maybe there is, I've never heard it. Maybe there's some central planner who's decided this is gonna make us all much happier and much more prosperous. They don't even attempt to convince you of that. They just shout slogans in your face, and if you ask a question, they call you a racist. And if you say, but I'm actually not a racist, and I'm not speaking for myself, I just want to know the answer, why are you doing this? Without the consent of the governed, it's a decision you made unilaterally, and they won't answer your question. Diversity is our strength. Okay, that may be true, it may not be true, I don't know. It's a metaphysical question, actually. But in practical terms, why do we have the highest immigration rate in the world? Shut up! And of course, the answer is political power. Political power. This is a democracy. Your citizenship entitles you to choose your leaders. Your vote is valuable because there's a finite supply of those votes. It's very much unlike the Canadian dollar, right? Or the US dollar, which in a pinch they can just print more of, and then the Canadian dollars you have in your pocket are worth less. Do you know anything about this? Have you heard this principle before? It's called supply and demand, and if you misuse it, if you ignore the most basic law of economics, you wind up with, repeat after me, inflation, with which you are familiar. Just inflation. The same principle holds for citizenship in a democracy. And if you don't like the way that the public votes, import new voters. And that's precisely what they're doing. They're doing that in the United States as well. And here's my point. You're taking it.
So there it is again. The whole point of Mr. Carlson's diatribe is to get to the place of replacement theory, to get to the place of, well, you know, here's the thing. They're replacing you with immigrants. They're trying to dilute the value of your vote with immigrants. And again, Danielle Smith heard the first version of that speech and chose to attend for the second version of that speech and to validate Tucker Carlson and his views. She has not since said, well, you know, I think the replacement theory thing that Tucker was spinning was kind of, I think it might have been a little bit of bullshit. She hasn't stood up for all of the new Canadians that have come to Alberta. She hasn't stood up for all of the new Canadians who pay taxes, who work critical jobs, who got this province in many cases through the pandemic in many different ways. No, she'll just silently let that go. But in case you were wondering of the type of quality of discourse, if we haven't made our point sufficiently, you have to know Tucker comes with the pedophile jokes.
Way for Canadians to know what's happening and to understand. You need a way. And it can't just be about Justin Trudeau, who's, if I can just say, so absurd that guy is gonna sashay off into history fairly soon, I think. Because, I mean, honestly, someone told me last night, I was talking to someone, to one of your countrymen at dinner last night, and Justin Trudeau, who I've never met, though I know his cousin Gavin Newsom, but he's so
He's so ridiculous. He's so transparently phony. I mean, I'm mesmerized watching him. And so my very obvious, as a foreigner, question at dinner was, does anyone believe him? And everyone at the table said, oh yeah, young people do. And I hope that's not true. No, it's not true. But the point is, there can't be more than 20% of Canadians who think he's not repulsive because he's just so obviously repulsive. But would you leave your kids with him? Would you be like, oh, we're going we need to go to Canadian Tire for an hour. Justin, can you watch my kids? I don't think you're going to do that. But you hand him your country. It's totally cool. Don't worry. He's a good steward. But he will collapse under the weight of his own ludicrousness and go back to Cuba or do whatever he does. But what? I don't know if that's true or not, but it's just too great to check.
Facts don't matter. I don't know if it's true or not. It's too great to check. Now, again, I can see in the chat that there's some people that are like, oh my God, this is so brutal. This is so bad. Can we just make it stop? We've only got 2-3 clips left, and 2 of them are really short. So we're almost done the Tucker train wreck. But it is really important because one of the things that's critically important to understand is that there were a couple thousand people in Calgary who showed up for this. There were, by some measures, 5,000 to 7,000 people who showed up in Edmonton for this. Now, whether or not they paid for the tickets doesn't really matter. They still heard this. And one of the things that made us decide to do this very special fact-checking episode was the fact that Graham Thompson, who's an incredible reporter, wrote a column where he talked about his sort of exit interviews, where there were 2 little old ladies who were leaving, and he asked them what they thought, and they said, oh, it's inspired me to tell my truth, and if people don't like it, I'm just going to keep telling my truth because, people need to hear what's actually going on. There are people who believe this stuff. There are people who buy this stuff. And it's critically important to point it out. If this was some fringe exercise, it would be far less concerning. But again, this is something that the Premier of Alberta chose to legitimize. And so for anybody who cares about this province, we have a responsibility to stand up and go, oh, I think that might be bullshit. But for all of the bullshit that Tucker offered up, which was, to be clear, a lot, he did have two little moments of clarity, moments of truth. I'm not sure what to call them. I mean, it's that stopped clock theory. Twice a day, even a stopped clock is right. Tucker had his two little moments as he went through his evening, his rant. We're going to share those for you. But before we do, we want to share two other quick little things that just go to show how the naivete of Danielle Smith has yet again embarrassed this province on an international level. Danielle Smith justified this whole exercise by saying, oh, Tucker's got this huge audience. He's going to reach so many people, and I want to make sure that, I can tell the Alberta story, even though she really didn't. She really didn't tell the Alberta story at all. What was the publicly released content from Mr. Carlson? He released his two speeches, and that's it. The only reason we have the Danielle Smith clip that we do is because somebody afforded us a copy, let's say. If you wanted to watch the rest of the content, then you're looking at a pay-per-view version where you have to sign up to be one of his members. So you have to be somebody who really, really wants the Tucker Carlson experience on the regular. But perhaps the most embarrassing part of this whole ridiculous exercise at least for Danielle Smith, is the event that she billed to tell Alberta's story is titled Liberating Canada, the Jordan Peterson discussion in Calgary. The episode details Tucker and Jordan Peterson on stage in Calgary, Canada. Also, it's like when you're the opener for a headline band, but you're supposed to be the main act. Tucker's discussion with Alberta Premier Danielle Smith. She's a footnote in the episode. But what were the things that Tucker told maybe a little bit of truth about? Well, he did talk about his belief on politicians.
The one thing they want is to be taken seriously. These are broken people. These are hollow people who are desperate for power because there's nothing else inside. There's nothing else inside. A normal person doesn't lust for power. He doesn't. He can use power to affect good, but power for its own sake is not interesting to him. In fact, it's dangerous, and wise people stay away from it. And so the kind of people who do lust for power are freaks. They're sideshow freaks. And the last thing they want is for you to say that out loud because they melt. Like a vampire at noon, they just disappear. And the second you laugh at them, you realize how good it feels to tell the truth. And you are empowered by the spirit of truth when you do that, and you become stronger. And so I look forward to your mockery of the people who misrule you. Thank you.
Oh, I think we can handle some of that here. But that wasn't even Tucker's biggest moment of truth. That wasn't even Tucker's most Freudian slippy slip of the night. And this is the last clip from Mr. Carlson that we want to play for you.
Before you take any sort of action or imagine that some election is going to fix things, which it's not, spoiler alert, because this country, like every country, very much, and maybe especially including my country, has a lot of frauds in that business. Sorry, it does. I would know. It's the one thing I know a lot about.
I mean, is Tucker's channeling his very best Donald Trump right there? Yeah, Tux. I imagine fraud is something. Being a fraud, defrauding people is something that you know a great deal about, I bet. That's the end of our Tucker Carlson segment. Props to everybody who weathered through that, because that was a gong show. We're going to be doing a two-parter episode again, I suspect, this time around, because we are nowhere near done just yet. We got us a little guest to help make sense of some of the things that we talked about at the beginning of the show. I'm not going to ask her too much about the Tucker stuff, because I think everybody's tuckered out. I'll see myself out. And I will see in Sarah Biggs. Sarah Biggs, thank you so much for joining us tonight. How are you doing?
Nate, I'm good. How are you?
I came up with that dad joke on the fly, and I'm pretty proud of myself right now.
It's midnight here. Good.
Look, it's not my fault you're in the wrong part of the country right now.
Sure.
I mean, so here's what I'm hoping that you can help us with, Sarah, because I don't want to belabor the Tucker thing, and then we'll open up our...
No, he's... I'm just going to say, A, why is he screeching so much? And B, fuck him.
You know what I disliked the most about...
My husband's gonna send me a text because he's tired of Tucker.
The thing that I disliked the most about Tucker's whole presentation, other than the content, which was, to be clear, super gross. The thing that I disliked the most about it was he does this thing when he laughs. And it's like I can't get behind Jerry's, like the Seinfeld show. I have a really hard time watching the Seinfeld show.
He sounds like a skunk.
Well, and he does this whole, like, I tilt my head back and I giggle and I just, and it's like, what? It's so fake and it's so performative, but I can't imagine that it works.
He's an idiot.
Is all I'm saying. Let's talk about some of the PR things that happened this week, some of the big stories that we saw this week.
You know, my line of work.
Exactly. So we saw the province announce $200 million for healthcare a couple weeks ago, like mid December, we saw the unbelievable answer that Dr. Paul Parks gave when the questions of vaccines and immunizations came up. So here's what my question is. That was mid-December that announcement was made.
Yeah.
We now are in the end of January, and there's this new survey that's talking about how many physicians are looking at leaving the province and citing the financial instability as being a big reason of it. And at the same time, we now are clarifying our language a little bit that the $200 million that the province promised doctors is actually coming from the feds. And we didn't remember to mention all that clearly, that it was coming in April. Did they make the announcement at the right time, or should they have waited?
They should have waited, because right now we're dealing with a lot of. So the reason why it is coming in April is because the fiscal year end at the federal level and the provincial level is March 31st. And they have put that into the budget for the 2025 budget. Yes. Okay. So line items, accounting exercises, but they should have waited, because the morale of the family doctors right now are at its lowest. 60%, if I'm not mistaken. Sorry, guys, I've kind of been in and out of
There's a lot of
Alberta.
Tucker.
There's a lot of stuff happening. 60% of our doctors right now, if I'm correct, are not super happy in the province right now. And they're thinking about maybe either retiring or moving or closing their practice. Some of them, their financials are like a month away from closing their business because they cannot continue to practice because of the costs and the poor pay. And then it's giving them hope, but then they're waiting and they're waiting and they're waiting and they're suffering, and the care, like the patients, Albertans, are paying for it because the resources are just not there right now. Like, they could be hiring more nurses, they could be hiring a nurse practitioner, there's a lot of things that could be done with that money to relieve the primary care network. But then they wanted a good news feel before Christmas, before everybody was leaving on vacation, and they wanted a point in the win column. They should have just waited when they got the money. Seriously, they could have said, we're working on something with the federal government, we're waiting for the agreement, but doctors, please know we are working on something to come and help and bring more resources on a financial matter with you. That should have been it. Don't say the money's coming when you're going to see it 6 months later. It doesn't make any sense. And especially when, a lot of rural emergency departments are closed. Because very often in rural communities, the family doc in the village is also doing some coverage at the hospital. Like when I was in Canmore, my family doctor was also in the emergency room in Canmore, and they were also anesthesiologists in the OR. So we need to stop with the overly enthusiasm of good news and really just try to be more precise, because people are getting tired. And already when things are being promised, they're not happening, and now things are being promised and it's really not happening. The last thing you want to do is to irritate the doctors right now, because the healthcare system is collapsing.
Well, I'm going to stay on the healthcare thing. I want to come back to the AISH changes, because I'm curious how you would have messaged that. Because that to me is kind of like, hey, look, we glued the pot that we broke back together. We glued it back together. It's all better now. Please forget that we broke it. But we'll stay on the healthcare thing for now. So what do you make of the pharmacy announcement? Because this to me is sort of one of those things where, like, I feel like, and tell me if I'm wrong, please, but I feel like the best idea would have been to go like, okay, Shoppers Drug Mart, you just do what we're going to do, and we're not going to have any sort of public-facing thing to do with it. That to me would have been a better strategy, because it wouldn't have brought all of the negative attention that it's, like doctors are saying, like, pharmacists aren't trained in physical assessment in anywhere near the same level. So here's the question: if you're advising the government, would you have said, "Hey, Shoppers Drug Mart, they're gonna roll out 100 and some odd new clinics. You should lead the announcement, Adriana LaGrange and Danielle Smith, even though you have absolutely nothing to do with any of it."
Yeah.
Would you have had him do it or no?
No. There's no. So I'm in Ontario, right? I'm in Quebec, Ontario. I'm kidding. Back east right now, and I was looking at the Shoppers Drug Mart website because now you can get a pap test, Imodium,
I'm
and
sorry.
your
What
lotto
did you say?
tickets because you can get a pap test done. You can get
No.
your Imodium
No. I got to make sure that.
pap test.
Oh my God.
What? It's a
At
pap
a
test.
Shoppers Drug Mart?
Yeah, in Ontario, you can get them done. Yeah, sorry. Okay, sorry. So I was looking at, list of services, and sometimes pap tests are offered because there's, doctors there or nurses trained for it.
Okay, but
So,
it's physicians or nurses that are doing it. It's not the
yeah,
pharmacists.
well,
Okay.
it's not super clear, but hold on. Hold on. Let me go back to my Shoppers Drug Mart page. I know.
I can't
So-
imagine they're licensed for that.
So, there's a lot of things that can be treated under that is covered by OHIP. But this is not all of the menu list, under women's health. Yeah, your UTI, dysmenorrhea, and vaginal candidiasis. But sorry, guys, it's gross words, but it's life. But it is a thing that you can get. You will be able to in Ontario. You can get a pap test done at the pharmacy.
By a doctor. It's got to be. Wow. Now
Yeah,
I've got something else to
it's-
look up. Thanks for that, Sarah.
Probably most likely by a doctor, but there's a lot of things that are covered by OHIP. Now, when was it? November, right before I had to leave to go to England for work, I had something in my throat, and healthcare system was just garbage. And I called my pharmacy. I was like, "Hey, can you do a swab?" And they were like, "Yeah, it's $40." And I was like, "Well, that's inconvenient." I would have paid for it, but I'm concerned that a lot of those, how could I say, a lot of those procedures will be pay to play, right? So we're gonna have to be careful. If there's no literal partnership with the province and money, public funding injected to bring in doctors, to bring in nurses and all that, the government should have stayed out of it, because guess what? Pharmacists are already taking care of certain conditions under their scope of practice. So I'm not sure how everything's going to turn out, but I would have not make the premier and the health minister travel for that. Absolutely not. It's nothing. It's nothing. It's like if Olsen and Biggs is like, "Hey, we're doing this. We're bringing something in the province," and Olsen and Biggs is personally investing the money, and like the government hijacks your press and say, "Well, we don't have anything to do with that, but hey, yay, they're gonna be here to help us a little bit." It's a nothing burger.
I have to turn the comments off on my screen because
I'm not looking at the comments.
You don't. I just gotta say,
Then wait in.
Plain Power gets the comment of the night, 100%.
Oh, good.
I'll just throw that bad boy up on the screen there.
Blood pressure, Joe, fuck's sakes.
You can tell we're 2 hours into the show. So here's my next question: Are
Yeah.
you concerned at all about the potential for conflict of interest issues? Because one of the things that has been raised by a lot of physicians, and again, this is one of those things that it's probably a good discussion to have, but I don't know that this is how the government wanted to frame this discussion. The question of if you've got a pharmacist who is selling the remedies, they have an interest in the remedies and the treatments that they're selling, not just personally if they're a pharmacy owner, but certainly from a corporate standpoint. And anybody who's ever worked retail has heard the word upselling and knows exactly how enthusiastic management can be about that. But do you think that there's any concern in regards to that? Do you think the government opened themselves up to this conversation? What's your take on that
Well,
piece?
what do you mean? Like by selling their own brand or one very
No, by
specific type
selling it,
because they're
period. Like
getting kickback?
if you go
Yeah,
to
well,
your
no, you can't overprescribe. Like that's the thing. When with a pharmacist, like if you don't need the meds, you don't take them. That's bottom line. It would be extremely. We would have to look at the code of conduct of the pharmacists, but they do take an oath. And honestly, if little Timmy doesn't need antibiotics, let's not give them to him, because at the end of the day, they're going to be selling them, sure, but the only money they're going to make on it, well, the margin is thin on the meds, and then they're going to be making $6.95 with the dispensing fee. Like, but it would be, we always talk about superbugs and how antibiotics. I'm just talking antibiotics right now because that's what comes up to mind. If you do not need antibiotics, it would be extremely disingenuous from a healthcare professional perspective to prescribe them just to bring some money in the cash register. Let's put it that
I
way.
think the question around the conflict of interest. I mean, the antibiotics. That's I think a more extreme example. But let's say that I
Yeah.
go to the pharmacist and I say I can't see my family doctor for. I don't have a family doctor. I'm like everybody in Elson in the province of Alberta right now. And when I move my arm, it hurts right here. And the pharmacist then goes, "Oh, you know what you need? You need an arm brace. We'll get you an arm brace." And then they walk you
Mm,
down the aisle in their pharmacy and they sell you, like, you can't go to your physician and buy an arm brace or a knee brace. You have to buy it somewhere else. And it's
yeah.
systemically designed like that to make sure that the physician isn't going, "Hey, I got the Bob's knee braces. They're the best knee braces, let me tell you."
I hope it won't happen, but there's bad people everywhere.
True.
There's dishonesty everywhere.
I
Like,
want to ask you about the hospital sign,
mm,
because this was pretty wild. So the sign gets posted in the Foothills parking lot, and everybody goes, "Wait, what?" And it says that it's there for the minister of health and the deputy minister, and um, I still can't believe. Like, I'm so used to the mats. I'm so used to the adversarial relationship with all of the press secretaries and the issues managers that when I got the DM from Adriana Lagrange's press secretary, I was like, "Oh, I got to make sure this is real first." So I'm on the government directory and everything. And it was legitimate. And she made the very clear claim that this was a mistake made by Alberta Health Services Parking, and that Adriana Lagrange has never, ever um, had reserved parking before. Um, And then CBC runs the story and they say, "Yeah, we checked and we got this exact same statement from both Adriana Lagrange's press secretary and from Alberta Health Services." So, like, that's to me is weird to begin with. But do you think that this is the kind of thing, like, did they need to respond, or should they have just been like, "We're going to let this conspiracy theory or whatever go be a conspiracy theory"?
you know what I would have done? I would have just published the minister's agenda for the day and let it answer for itself.
Oh, see, this is why
You
we have
can
these
FOIP,
conversations.
you can FOIP it, but My husband's like Davos of the North. Oh my God. Sorry, my husband has not seen me in person more than just my face in over a month. So, hi, husband. Um,
Bringing people together on the breakdown. That's what we do.
he's my poor husband. He's stuck with a puppy, an epileptic dog, a raging toddler, and a tween, alone at home with no end in well, for another little while.
But I love the idea of just publishing, because if she wasn't
Yeah,
supposed to be
if she
there,
wasn't supposed to be there, just publish the agenda for the day and the itinerary. Like the prime minister does this here, and the deputy prime minister, they do that. Here's the itinerary for the day. Just FOIP it. Let's be done with it. Let's FOIP it.
well, I think I'm done
That's
with it
it.
now. I think we've gotten maximum fun out of this one.
But
But here's the other
knows?
question I want to follow up. You've
But
been
can I say something?
of
It
course
is.
you can.
Oh, thank you. But I will say this: it is not the first time that a AHS statement has been altered with the writing style of certain higher offices.
Okay. Hey, you've worked in and around government. Have you ever seen a minister or a deputy minister or an MLA get reserved parking?
Sometimes.
Oh, so it does happen.
It does happen sometimes.
Scandal.
Especially when it's very, very busy locations.
Like the Foothills Hills Hospital.
That's the thing. Everything needs to be put in context.
Oh, you're killing me here.
Wait.
Ugh.
Well, see, I'm in Ottawa this week. Long story, but today was Ed Broadbent's funeral. And there was a lot of people, but it was a very busy venue. But the ministers, they had a little parking not too far from the door, and with their drivers. But again, it's it depends on the venue. If we know it's a very, very busy venue, yes, the minister, we will try to make sure that they have a parking spot, so they don't have to walk from the way back of the parking lot to the front.
Hey, what do you make about the contribution limits being bumped up?
Can we talk about the TPA's contributions being bumped up as well?
Yes. Now,
Because they went
for anybody who's listening to the show for the first time, what's a TPA?
third party. It's a
Advertiser. Yeah.
party advertiser. Sorry, I've been speaking French a whole lot for the past month. It's a TPA, it's a PAC, it's what, Take Back Alberta is what, Equal Voice is what whatever Calgary PACs we can see, or, Mothers Against Drunk Driving, they can be considered like a PAC during an election. A PAC is an organization that will take donations. As of last week, they were allowed to take up to $30,000 from a year from individuals and corporations, because corporations can donate to a PAC. Now, it's been increased to 34.9 or 35. Nate, you're gonna have to fact check me on that. But I'm sure that they're gonna be justifying it with cost of, living costs and inflation and everything in between, because it costs more money to get signs now and everything's insane. Or it's an easier way to download a little bit more cash and get a nice tax receipt. But
Political third party advertisers, $34,400.
See, I was off by 500. I'm sorry, but no, I think
My favorite's the Senate one, though.
I can't.
$5,000.
I can't. No.
Tax deductible. $5,000 for the Senate candidate. I love it. I absolutely love it, because it's so dumb. Like,
I can't. Can we just not do this anymore?
right?
Like the whole Senate thing, there's a lot of competent senators just around the corner from where I'm staying. Like high pull assignments. She's looking for someone to work for her, by the way. But
I saw that Facebook post.
yeah, but it's does it help the PACs? Yes. Can the corporation can offload a little bit more money? Yeah. Can some very high donors can give tiny little bit more? Yeah, because it's a $700, $800 increase. But at the end of the day, it's not okay. Everybody's gonna hate me for saying that, but it's not that. It's not that much. $800 on a $1 million campaign is a drop in the bucket, and there's not a lot of people that can afford that. So that $800 that you're gonna go get from your big donors, maybe you're going to be getting like, I don't know, 8,000 or 80,000 more on $1 million. I they should have just left it as it was. Sure, but it's not. At the end of the day, democracy is not in danger because they have increased limits. No.
Fair enough. Last one I wanted to get your thoughts. Well, second last one that I wanted to get your thoughts on was the AISH changes. So we saw on January 26th, Jason Nixon lumbered out from his cave and announced that they were going to be changing the AISH payment dates back, and they're not even waiting for the end of the fiscal year this time. So it almost seems like it's well intentioned. What do you make of it?
I
And
remember,
as a supplementary, how would you have communicated it?
well, I remember writing the exact same policy 2 years ago. But, and that binder was submitted to the current government. Anyways, because, when you write policy for a leadership campaign, it ends up into the hands of the individual that wins. But at the first time, we should have never written that policy because it should have never been reverted. Like, sure, they're going to get a point because, after a while, they're doing what needed to be done. But the damage has already been done. Too many people suffered over too many years. And it brought a lot of individuals in very, very, very difficult financial positions. So, good for them. Like, sure, like, if they looked at it and be like, "Hey guys, that's stupid. That was a little low on the list of priority, but we're gonna get it done." But they're not gonna get a hero cookie for it because they were the party that canceled it in the first place.
Do you think, and this was one of the things that struck me about it, is, I have always been humbled and impressed by the advocacy that a lot of members of the disabled community do.
Yes.
They are relentless and like nothing but mad respect for so many of the disability advocates that are out there. Do you think that this change is a lesson in the importance of advocacy? And like it's literally 4 years that they had to do this for, but they moved the needle on it. And as much as Minister Nixon wants to stand up and be like, "Look, we unfucked it," I think at the end of the day, the credit needs to go to the advocates.
Yep.
Am I reading that wrong? Do you agree? What's your take?
I agree. People since like we've been yelling at the clouds against this policy for a very, very, very long time. Even like, privileged people like you and I, and we've been pounding on tables, yelling at the sky, and nothing was getting done. But the advocates, definitely, they get all the hero cookies that they want because it's like advocates in education, it's like advocates in healthcare. It's how you get shit done at the end of the day. Doesn't matter how good your lobbyist is or how good your policy writer is. If there's no will from the government, there's no will, there's no way. But advocates group have will and they found a way. It took a very long time and shame on the government for dragging their feet. But it's back, and I'm happy for everyone that will be impacted by that policy. So, the minister, good for the minister. you got it done, but that's it. But it should have never happened in the first place.
Cool beans. You want to hang out for the open mic? Is
Oh
it past your-
dear. Hey,
is
if we forgot to talk about the NDP leadership race.
Well, I wasn't sure if you wanted to, so I was going to let you bring it up or not.
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay, we'll do the NDP leadership, and then we'll do the open mic, and you can hang out if you want to. But if you're about to turn into a pumpkin, then you can also tap out.
What time is it? It's 12:30. It's fine. I didn't take my meds yet.
So we got the NDP leadership race. We know June 22nd. There's going to be a 20-week campaign.
Yeah, 20 weeks. It's fast. It's fast.
Well, it gives them Stampede though, and that Edmonton thing.
Yeah, but I like campaigning during Stampede. It's a lot of fun. It's because you run into so many people that you really need to talk to during Stampede. I'm not talking the fun about alcohol and playing Mr. Dress Up for a week, Nate. That's not what I'm talking about here. Good God.
Well, no, but like realistically, anybody who, if we're going to have a leadership race ending on June 22nd for the NDP,
Yeah.
the Stampede is going to be all about campaigning.
Oh, yeah. Well,
Like,
yeah.
Everybody's going to be like, I want you to come into my luxury suite now that you can.
Yes, but I do enjoy a good leadership campaign during Stampede. It's fun because you cross the other campaigns and you're trying to get the signatures and you're like, dun, dun, dun. It's quite interesting to see who you can convince first. But no, it's going to be interesting because the way it seems like I'm feeling that there's a change. Like, if you look at the rules, they have really tried to protect the integrity of the party. If you look at people have to be members, before August 5th, if they would like to seek nomination for leadership. Then all the signatures they need to gather. There's very specific caveats, like the details are not all public. It's going to come in the next few days, but it's going to be a very, very intense campaign. We're going to see a lot of focus on economy. Healthcare is going to be a pain point as well. Like, we're going to have the real conversations here. It's not going to be easy. It's, and I'm looking forward for all the candidates to bring really, really good policies on the table. But the thing is that at the end of the day, there's a lot of problems that we cannot hide from. And if we hide from those problems, then at the end of the day, are we really having an honest conversations about what the issues really are? And I think that we're going to have to, I can't wait to see, especially the debates. It's going to be very, 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 very interesting because from the names that we're hearing, the background is going to be a very diverse crowd. And, some candidates will be more experienced than others. So we're going to see how everything plays out at the end of the day. But, healthcare, education, oh my God, the
Premier?
No. The policy they're supposed to put out. Parental rights, sorry. It's a thing that doesn't exist in Canada, but they feel like they need to depoliticizing it by doing an announcement about a policy. I still have not processed that. I'm still trying to do the math around that. But it's going to be interesting to see how Albertans are reacting to everything.
Do you think that this is going to be like one of the things that we saw in the UCP leadership race was there were sort of two enemies, if you will. One of them was unquestionably the Notley Trudeau Singh alliance. And that one was sort of always there, but there was also this nobody was really like, hey, you know what? Vote for me or anybody but Smith, please, anybody but Smith. And Smith became the enemy of that leadership race. She ended up walking away with it. I'm curious, how much of a role do you think Danielle Smith is going to play in this leadership race? Is the NDP going to be better served making the leadership race about their vision for the economy and their vision for healthcare, or do they need to have that foil of Danielle Smith? I mean, we've seen a bunch of alleged candidates coming out and being like, this Tucker Carlson thing is a complete unmitigated shit show.
Yeah, but we all know that. Like,
Well, 7,000 people don't, at
yeah,
least
well, it's the fringe minority.
in Edmonton.
Yeah, but let's be honest. They're not all from Edmonton, Glenora,
That's true.
or Edmonton, Strathcona, right? They're not.
I bet there were buses from Leduc. Like, I love you, Leduc.
Leduc's not a bad place sometimes when you need a good hotel not too far from the airport.
There's a great Mexican restaurant in Leduc.
Is there?
Yeah, it's fantastic.
I always go to Edmonton Airport for work. I should try to find it one day. Maybe when I'm back in the province. So I think that Smith has been elected. She's not going anywhere. She still has 3 years to go. 3.5-ish. 3 years, 4 months. Who's counting? But I think that what you want to see people, like Albertans are tired because it's always been special interest groups here, special interest group there. It's always been cliquey. It's always been this. It's always been that. It's always been like, what am I going to get for myself? What am I going to get for myself? What will my donors will get for themselves? And I feel like Albertans have been forgotten a lot, and we've paid the price for a lot of it, especially in the last election. And I personally don't think that taking a huge swing at Smith is going to be the way to go, because she's elected, guys. There's nothing we can do. We can only move forward. The leader's leaving. She's not staying.
I mean, there is a leadership review coming for her.
No, I'm talking about Nutley. She's gone.
Oh, sorry, I thought you meant Smith.
Yeah, the NDP leader's gone. Smith's going to be in there for 3 years still. There's nothing we can do. There's nothing we can change. So let's just look forward. Let's stop looking at the back.
There we go. I would be interested in seeing what the vision, because I've been saying for the better part of a year now that
it's been lacking a vision.
It's been lacking a vision, but it's also I'm curious what the Civil War is going to look like, because there's going to be the historic NDP lefty left base who want to see
the gang.
Green Party policies, and then you're going to see the more centrist.
Well, the centrists are like, especially. The centrists are more in Calgary and the south of the province, I would say. The left is more, I would say, Edmonton. I would say.
Who are the left NDP MLAs right now, though? Like, who are the left? Like, if we look at the list of candidates, I don't think David Shepherd is alleged candidates. I don't think David Shepherd is super left. I don't think that Catherine Ganley is super left. I don't think that Sarah Hoffman is super left. I don't think
she's a little bit more left. She's a little
Hoffman's
bit
a little
more
bit more left, but it's like a little bit.
Yeah.
Who else do we have? Pancholi, yeah. I mean, she would probably be the most left, but even then, like, she's not super left.
No. It's the thing is that we're gonna see what they. It's gonna be interesting to see what the really grassroots, who they will be following. And we're always talking about expanding your base. And that's what, if we remember, that's what happened in Calgary in the last election. What happened because they didn't expand their base? The election was lost on 1,200 votes. So who will be able to rally corporate Calgary, oil and gas Calgary, blue-collar Calgary, and the rest of the province together and have a viable solution for the next election? That's what we're going to have, because, it's always about Edmonton. We know, like, Edmonton is like the stronghold of the NDP. Yes, Calgary won more seats, but they could have won more is certain things would have not been done, like increasing corporate tax by 3%. I'm just saying.
I'm not disagreeing. I've
Or
beat that
not
horse to
taking a
death.
position, or not taking position on the arena. Flippy
True.
floppy, can't do that. Just saying.
Oh yeah, that would be a spicy little meatball to throw in there. I could keep going on the NDP thing, but I want to save some of
No,
that
let's do
we got like
the
4
open
months.
mic.
Let's
Yeah.
bring in Chris. God willing, the audio works this time. I think I sourced out what the problem was last week. So, Chris, if you're there, speak, and hopefully we'll hear you.
Oh, I don't know how to use the microphone, apparently.
Yeah, I can hear you.
Hey, how's it going?
Chat.
So
Chat, let me know.
everything good? Are we good?
I mean, I
Yes.
can hear you. I have audio coming through for sure, the Twitter Spaces, and it looks like through the streaming platform. So push comes to shove, I can do what I did last week and meld the audio back in. But hopefully there's a few folks in the chat who will say, yeah, we can totally hear it. And Lynn says, yes, I fixed the problem. Chris, what's going on?
Hey, not too much. I just had some notes. I was just, writing as we were going through the show. Sorry, just give me a second here.
I imagine it's a couple pages.
Not pages, I promise. Anyway, okay, so the first thing is on the whole upcoming parental rights policy coming out. One thing that I can say, I'm not going to use this person's name because I'm not the kind of person who believes in directing people to harass other people online. But there is apparently a trans woman who has supposedly met with the premier with quote unquote some other people saying, oh yeah, she, connected with us and spoke with us. And, I think this is going to be a balanced policy.
Okay. Is this the same one who posed with Danielle Smith like 10 years ago?
Very possibly. Apparently, Danielle Smith wrote a glowing review of her on a National Post or some other column.
And she's also a contributor to the Western Standard, just saying.
That's correct, and that's kind of what I'm pointing out. But I'm betting you that's going to be one of the people who's probably going to show up and probably going to play a role. And I just think I think it's really funny because this same person in later responses on her account said, "Oh, I actually liked a lot of what Tucker Carlson said." And it was kind of wild because I'm like, did you listen to him?
So I'm going to say the thing right now in advance. I'm just going to get it out of the way. Tempted to grab the cancel clock. I'm going to. Midnight. Here we go. I'm going to say the thing. You can be trans and an asshole.
Yep.
Two
and that's the
things can
thing.
be true at the same time. I'm not saying all trans people are assholes. I'm not saying all assholes are trans. But you can be trans and an asshole. Now, I'm not saying this about any particular person, but if there's a tokenism thing that happens when this announcement gets made, that's maybe something people should be thinking about.
Well, and that was kind of why I want to mention it is just, it's so funny that there always seems to be those few people willing to throw their name out there and throw themselves. It's like Tim Scott with Trump, it's like he's just throwing himself out there and you're like, bold move, Colin. Let's see if this plays off. Like,
everybody does that. A lot of public people are throwing themselves with Danielle Smith. Like, of course, she's going to be listening. Like, Parents for Choice, Take Back Alberta. It's nothing new, really. It's special.
It's not. Yeah, you're right. It's not new.
But it's like when I was talking earlier about certain interest groups being listened more, certain people, or having more influence. Well, that would be part of it. Like selective hearing.
I just want to be super clear. Being trans or LGBTQ2S+ or anything does not insulate you from being a sellout. Period.
No.
The Venn diagram of what kind of human you can be and whether you're a good person or a piece of shit is kind of there's overlap. There's no such thing as exclusive zones.
This is what I'm saying. Thank you, Chris. Yeah, what else you got, man?
So I had a couple other quick points. One is just how brilliant this is, that at the same time that the NDP are having their leadership race, the UCP hand them 3 gifts. They hand them the pension plan, where now they're able to reach out to a bunch of the older, Albertans, especially, in the UCP voter base. You have the parental rights thing coming up, which is going to galvanize the youth.
Oh, good catch.
And you also have Coots, which is an issue because, and I'm mentioning this because, again, you've seen both on Friday and on Saturday, and maybe not Friday, but connected to the Tucker thing where she first addressed it in the Calgary presentation about Coots. And then there was the Jason Markusoff CBC article on Friday. And then there was which discusses how, she's been trying to get away from this whole Coots thing because her extremist base really, really wants that. And she knows she can't do anything. And the less she does, the worse it is. But I make this point to go back apparently on Saturday, she again mentioned Coots. I think that's going to be another issue where it's going to be a question of stability. So you're going to have a lot of Calgarians, a lot of people who are on the center saying, oh, well, this is leaning towards the extreme part we don't like, the culture war stuff we don't like. Yeah. At the end of the day, the NDP are going to have at least 3 or 4 different opportunities over the leadership race where not only are they selling memberships, but they're able to widen the reason why they can sell memberships. They can campaign on the APP, on this and this. It's like, why would the UCP, at the time when the NDP could literally be at their weakest, hand them these gifts?
Okay, so I'm going to say this. Danielle Smith was exactly the way she is 2 years ago during the leadership campaign.
Totally.
So people voted her in fully knowing that, it was going to happen. And also, hold on, sorry. Also, before I forget, because my memory's terrible these days, it will depend how the campaigns are dealing with all of those issues and how they will be creating messaging around it and crafting it very carefully. Because if we keep smashing on Smith constantly, it's not going to work.
You're right, but sorry not to interrupt you, Nate. I was just going to say what works, though, is that this gives them things they can attack that's not Smith. They can attack the APP. They can attack the parental rights thing. They can go to these issues, which are very real issues that affect economic and social issues in our society. So the thing is, too, is for all the NDP candidates, no matter who it is, they're all going to at least agree on the fundamentals. We want to protect gay and trans kids in schools. We're going to want to avoid the APP. They can unite on singular messaging. So even if, let's say, they're disagreeing on leftist, centrist perspectives, they still have a united message they can sell to their voters, sell to people who are looking, while selling memberships. It's kind of like a weird intersection of very good things that they could pull off. I'm not saying they will. I'm saying they could.
Yeah, actually, I got to say, Chris, I was doing a little bit of the typing while you were speaking there. Assuming that the membership requirements are kept the same, I was just looking at the NDP membership requirement. You can be 14 and be a member of the Alberta NDP. That puts you in grade 8 or grade 9.
Yeah.
Like,
imagine how many kids are going to feel politically motivated because they see what's happening in the States, they see what's happening in Saskatchewan, and then they think, I'm next. And I'm not trying to say that to be scary. What I'm saying is,
there's an untapped
human
demographic
society,
there for sure.
Sorry, I was just going to say, in human society, you don't get politically involved until your skin is in the game.
Yep. Yeah, that's actually a really interesting point, because if Smith rolls out we're coming for the rights of kids and does a notwithstanding clause type thing,
hell's going to break loose.
There's a lot, that's a lot of students that have otherwise no feeling like they have a voice, and they get to choose the next leader of the NDP. Dang, that's a good call. That's a good call. What else you got, man?
My last point, sorry, I'll be quick about this. Can I talk about the Layden Gray text I mentioned? Sorry, this is that podcast thing I sent you over DM.
Yeah, I mean, if you want, you can. Be quick.
Okay,
May I ask?
no, it's okay. I won't really mention it. But anyway, the one thing I want to say is, while at the same time that the NDP have a chance to unite, it sounds like there's division on the other side. And I think that that's something we should be that like the idea that they've all coalesced around one person isn't true. People can change their minds. So I think it's going to be an interesting few months, is my point, and that's where I'll leave it.
Well, I mean, we saw in that interesting little biopic that was done and released this weekend, even the David Parker came out and said, I told Smith that if she does 3 things, then I'll leave her alone. And if she doesn't do those 3 things, then I'll do exactly to her what I did to Kenny. And one of those things was the electronic tabulators. So hooray, we get to wait till the next day to find out our next election results. But that to me is a fascinating glimpse on how, where his loyalty lies. And she went to his wedding.
Right.
So if he's willing to roll on her over electronic tabulators, I think there's plenty of loyalty among thieves, something.
One last thing, actually, if I can add that just to that point, Tucker Carlson at one point during one of the clips you played was talking about how, these people want lust for power. They want power for its own sake. They don't want it to do good things. They want it for their own sake. I think you remember that clip, right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. No, I played that one on purpose.
And then in that article that we just read today, that was released from the National Post, it's talking about how David Parker has a messianic complex, and he thinks of himself as a general and as a white knight. And I'm just like, you did listen to Tucker Carlson. He's your buddy.
Yeah. No, there's a definite lack of self-awareness going on for sure.
But that's all I have to say. Thank you for having me on, and I hope you guys have a good night.
Yeah. Thanks, man.
Okay.
Going to add in progressive Albertan. I think that we've had them on the show a couple of times before. And then we got 2 other callers, and then we're going to wrap it up. And I'm definitely going to have to break this episode up into 2 chunks. So, progressive, what's going on?
Hi.
Hey.
Hey.
Okay, so I think I'll get this started. Jagmeet Singh, he recently visited Edmonton. If you knew that or didn't know that. He visited Edmonton.
We had a caucus retreat.
Sorry. Sorry about that.
No, it's okay. Sorry. No, they had their caucus retreat in Edmonton. Yeah.
Yeah, they had their caucus retreat with their MPs. And, that could boost support for the Alberta NDP, but ultimately, the name Jagmeet Singh does not really ring good bells in many Albertans. They see him as, he's like this Trudeau 2.0, if you know what I mean. I think in Calgary too, from what I've seen, they still see him as like a Trudeau 2.0, and that if you vote NDP, you're just voting Liberal, which I don't think is true at all. And the Tucker Carlson thing, I'm just going to cover that real quick. He said things about immigrants which would really piss you off and piss immigrants off, and ultimately anybody of any minority background off. And I think, what is it, Calgary East, that riding, the provincial riding, there's a sizable minority population there. And, how could the people of Calgary East, for example, continue voting for the UCP when they saw Smith get on stage with somebody like Tucker Carlson and, she might not be associated with those ideas, but, when she's on the stage and talking with him, you can see that, she somewhat, maybe supports the idea.
Well, she doesn't disavow the idea, and I think that's what the big issue is. But I think the other big problem that is going to exist, and then I'll let Sarah jump in, I think the other big problem that's going to exist is the only materials that Tucker publicly released were his 2 speeches, and you have to want to go, quite frankly, looking for them. I haven't seen them widely shared across social media platforms.
No, I sent you one, right? Yeah, I did.
Okay, yeah. I just pulled both of them off of his own Twitter, and I was impressed at the low quality of the video for the Calgary one. But the bottom line is, there's a lot of barriers to entry. As much as Danielle Smith was like, I want the biggest audience ever. There's a lot of barriers of entry for the Tucker Carlson thing. And I think that that's one of the reasons why not looking away is so important, because the people who believe these things will gravitate towards them. And the people who reject these ideas and recognize them for the ugly, divisive rhetoric that it is, they're the ones who are going to go, I'm not going to bother. And unfortunately, that allows them to continue under the cloak of invisibility to some degree. And especially when we're talking about a lot of the new Canadians I work in Northeast Calgary, so I'm quite familiar with the demographics there. And there's a lot of barriers of entry for Anglophone social media for some of these folks. And I don't think that they'll be aware that this is the type of rhetoric that Danielle Smith got up on stage with, not once, but twice, and didn't condemn either time.
Yeah, I agree. I'm a minority background too. I'm Chinese, and I think not a lot of the Chinese community in Calgary either is politically active, per se. And I have family who's Chinese. They're not politically active. They don't care. They'll continue voting UCP because that's what everybody else is doing. Stick with the crowd if you want to stay alive. I think that's the kind of message in minority communities. You stick with the crowd if you want to stay alive, because a lot of our older peers born before 1960, they had to do what the superiors say to survive. And I think, frankly, that type of message is still around. You stay with the crowd if you want to survive.
That's a good point, man.
I think that what boggles me is that Tucker seems to be forgetting that his great-great-grandpa came off a boat about 200 years ago.
He diluted the vote.
He diluted the vote. Like, I'm a first generation Canadian. Like, same as you. Like, my family is a family of immigrants. And am I diluting the vote? Probably. I'm sorry. Am I sorry? Absolutely not. But the thing is that it's so much easier just to bash on minorities and First Peoples because they sometimes out of fear, they don't want to strike back. And we need to give them that voice. And that's why very often we're seeing communities following one very specific person out of fear or one very specific leader. Just look at North Korea, what's happening. Like, they're scared. They're all starving, but they need to STFU, because if not, well, they're going to go to Gulag for 15 years, for 3 generations. So, I think that a lot of what we're seeing right now is that a lot of communities do not feel empowered, and we need to be able to empower them and give them a voice.
Totally agree. And as the middle-aged white guy, I just like to say, one of the most important things is I have a lot of privilege in this. And, I've talked on the show before about, my personal epiphanies around privilege. But, when the Tucker Carlson people come, they're not going to be coming for me. So it would be very easy for me to go, la, 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 not my problem. But the reality is, it absolutely is my problem. And one of the biggest realizations of my lifetime was really getting, not just the academic part, but really getting that I can walk down literally any street in Calgary. I don't know Edmonton. I just get lost. But I can walk down literally any street in Calgary.
In Edmonton.
And I'm not afraid.
Yeah.
And the reality is, you want to talk about, 50% of the population who are women, there's streets they're very much afraid on. And you want to talk about people who are not the middle-aged white guys. If you choose not to use your privilege to speak up for groups that would take on a disproportionate amount of risk, then you're an asshole.
Mm-hmm.
That's kind of where it starts and stops for me.
And I think the other thing is, too, a lot of the minorities, I think maybe you covered this, I'm not sure, but they don't usually use their voice as much. I think back in 2020,
it costs
in Chinatown, there was a burning of a restaurant. I think it was either Chinese or Vietnamese, but it didn't make much news because the minority group does not usually prop up their voice as much as let's say if the Western restaurant burned, they'll be vocal about it. It'll be all over the city news.
Yeah. Well, thanks,
And,
man. I really appreciate that.
you.
Yeah, no
Have a
problem.
good night.
Yeah, thanks for tagging in
Nice.
again, even though we're super late. We got 2 new callers. I'm going to bump to the top of the queue. We're going to bring in Chad first, and then we're going to bring in Lawrence, and then we'll see where we are for time and whether or not Sarah's still conscious. But Chad, you've been on the show before. It's been a while.
Hey,
What's
it's
going
been a
on?
long time. Good to talk to you and Sarah. Good conversation this evening. Yeah, I just wanted to point out, with the NDP leadership race, I was in the room where it happened on Saturday. The other interesting thing that I find, and we were talking about the 14-year-olds that could, you can vote, when you are 14. The interesting thing too is that the NDP can offer free memberships in the Constitution as well. You don't actually have to pay for them. So the interesting thing with
Wait. Can you please repeat that? Sorry.
So
Can you please
don't
repeat
actually
that?
have to pay for a membership with the NDP. You can
No.
email the provincial. Yes,
I
it's in the
paid
Constitution.
$1.
Sorry about your dollar, but no. I mean, you can email the provincial secretary with your case, and they can issue you a membership.
Yeah.
So, and the deadline, isn't actually the previous August, right? It's to be a member to vote. It's something like
April 22nd.
What is it? April 22nd, exactly. Yeah. To be eligible to be a candidate to be a leader was August.
August 5th.
Yeah. So so let's stop talking about Lukasik. Let's stop talking about Nenshi because that's never going to happen, guys.
I mean, was Lukasik a member in August, though? Did he lend his membership post-election?
I don't know.
I don't know.
Well, okay, so here's the thing. Lending your vote and getting a membership are two different things.
He campaigned, though. The dude Dornock.
Doesn't matter. Doesn't matter. Doesn't make you a member.
It doesn't make him not a member.
Well, hell,
the possibility's there. I just don't see it happening. I mean,
I'm just saying.
I don't think that he'll be popular among the membership, to be honest with you.
But they could go to council and ask for an exemption, just like MRG did 2 years ago for the
application. I mean, is he really going to spend $60,000 knowing that he's not largely popular with a lot of the membership?
I don't think so.
Lukasik?
Right?
No, he's not gonna go in. He's happy.
No.
He's doing whatever the hell he wants.
He's doing some amazing, important work, and I think that if we're going to talk about were they or were they not members, there's one name that everybody's been kicking around, and it's not Lukasik.
No.
So I think that it's a great pipe dream for some people, but I feel like he might work on a campaign, but I don't think he would be. And it's interesting, but it's interesting thought, but it won't happen. But anyways, I just wanted to chime in with those couple things, and you guys do a great show, and hope Sarah gets some good sleep tonight. And thanks so much for the mic.
Yeah, thanks, man. Cool.
Cheers.
I'm going to bring in Lawrence because I don't think he's ever been a speaker before. We got a busy little queue here. I said 2 more speakers, and then everybody was like, wait. So we'll work our way through till Sarah or I fall over. Lawrence, what's going on tonight? And this is the part where I remind all of our first-time callers that you have to unmute yourself using the little microphone thinger in the bottom left-hand corner.
Can you hear me now?
I can hear you now.
There you go.
Oh, okay. Perfect. No, thanks for having me. I'm glad to hear Sarah's back. It's been a long time, so that was a pleasant surprise tonight.
I'll be back for a little. I'll be gone for a little bit more.
Well, I know it's late,
I'm sorry.
so I'll kind of just jump right to my point here.
Yes.
And I'll try to keep it short. The main thing was about the.
Ruh-roh.
And we don't know what it looks like.
Can you please repeat that?
Can you rephrase that, man? Because you said the main thing is, and then it went totally silent.
Okay. Sorry, I'm getting a little bit of feedback on my side too. Can you hear me okay now?
Yeah, you're good.
Okay. I was just saying, as a member of the LGBT community, someone who's gay, I'm really concerned about this quote unquote broad-based consultation, because it doesn't seem to have happened. And, one thing that really underpins this discussion, and I appreciate you talking so much about Tucker tonight, because he even said it, is the ability for others to quote unquote make people gay or trans. Like Tucker said at one point, if you do this, the left's gonna make your son or your daughter or something like that. And that doesn't happen. And there's no way for you to protect your children from becoming gay or trans. And I guess as this policy comes out, I think that's really important that we keep in mind is what does this discussion look like about why this is happening, because it drives me up the wall that that's the reasoning behind this. And they're trying to base that and say that that's to make children safe, because the other part of this is a government that hasn't held, at least to my knowledge, the Calgary Stampede accountable for actual harm that was done to children when they covered up the sexual assault that was done and covered up for decades, right? Like if you compare that to the changes that they made to the board in Banff, like they completely replaced everyone on that board, right? And they haven't made any changes to the Calgary Stampede like that. And that really grinds my gears. So I just wanted to say that. So thank you for having me tonight.
Yeah.
Damn, man. Hold on a second. I'm just going to do this for you because that was solid.
That was good. Good.
And the Banff Center comparison, that's brilliant. Yeah. And I mean, the thing that blows my mind is, when you raise such a good point about the whole choosing, because I had somebody send me a bunch of, and this is real, it's documented, it's academic, it's not just like la la la, but there's a Mormon. He's like high in the Mormon church, and he's done a bunch of research into the actual organic brain stuffs that exist, and it's definable. Like this isn't a choice. This isn't psychology. This isn't that. There are physical characteristics that exist. And to try to say that somebody is good, and I always go back to the whole thing, like if you believe that somebody can, make you gay, if you believe that, I'm just curious what it would take. Like, where's your red line? Because I'm not. I'd like to think that I've made my position on LGBTQ issues pretty clear, but I'm not, and I can't imagine a universe where I would be like, oh, you know what, maybe. That's just not in my makeup. And that's neither a right nor wrong thing. That's just the reality. And so when you have these people who are like, oh, but somebody could convince you, well, I would legitimately like to know, what would it take? I had a conversation with somebody a little while ago where they were like, well, they could try to convince your kids. And I'm like, okay, so would you turn gay for $1? And he was like, no, of course not. Okay, $10 million, would that be enough? And he was like, no, I couldn't. Okay, so $10 million won't get you there, but you think that somebody saying it's cool is going to get somebody else there? Like, give your head a shake. It's wild to me.
It's...
Yeah. That's what I got on that. We got two more call. Lawrence, I just want to say again, that was concise and brilliant. Like, well done, sir. You can call in all the time.
DM me if you have any punchlines, please.
Yeah, that was amazing.
Yeah,
all right, we're going to bring in Tammy and then Andrea, and then we're wrapping it up because it is 11 o'clock. This is a 3-hour show. It's like we're on Gilligan's Island now, y'all. Tammy, what's going on?
Well, I'm going to not change the topic a lot because you did talk about it, but I'm going to move away from the directly politics thing. Okay, so you know some of my medical background.
Yep.
Do you know how PO'd I am about this idea of people going to a pharmacy and thinking they're going to get like medical help beyond getting their prescription filled. Let's put it this way. So I've had 2 strokes, cancer. My latest bad medical thing that happened, I thought I had an eye infection. I went to our family doctor. They prescribed me antibiotics. No problem. Took the antibiotics, used them regularly. Didn't fix my eye. I went back. Oh, well, must just be, well, didn't give you the right kind of antibiotic. We'll give you a different one. Go home. My eye was getting worse. And I was literally, I write for a living. I'm a technical writer. I got that. That was like my dream job that I got after not being able to work after 2 strokes and cancer. So like the idea that I was going blind was, you can imagine, extremely upsetting. So I ended up going to the hospital. They didn't have an eye specialist, so they sent me to the Royal Alec to their, they have what they call the eye clinic.
Yep.
And I saw an ophthalmologist who took a look at me. First off, I got all I call them the kid doctors. They're not kids, but all of his students, and they came and they looked at my eye and they went away, and they looked at my eye again and they came away, and they kept asking me weird questions. And then finally he came in the room and he looked at my eye and said, okay, we're going to do a whole bunch of tests. And so did a whole bunch of tests, and after they'd done all those tests and he put me on some different meds, I had to come back and see them again, and my cornea had become literally a hole in it because of, well, he didn't tell me, but I happen to know because I used to raise horses, and we had a horse that had a problem with its eye. And one of the things the doctor, the vet told us was you had to be really careful about the kind of antibiotics you put in your eye, because literally what happened to that horse, even though we were using a prescribed antibiotic for the horse, her cornea started to collapse. And when I saw that doctor, after he figured out that my cornea was collapsing, I told him that story, and he got this like, oh crap, this person knows way too much. She's going to be shit scared when I basically tell her, yeah, that's kind of what happened. Now, they fixed my eye. I don't have a problem.
Excellent.
But I do have a problem. All of that was an autoimmune disorder. Now, can you imagine me in that situation, having, instead of seeing my family doctor, having gone to a pharmacist?
Well, and this is the thing. Like, one of the things that I struggle with this whole idea of pharmacists being a diagnostic part of primary care, other than for the most basic of things, is one of the things that I believe is critically important for healthcare practitioners is you got to know when you don't know, and you got to be willing to go, I don't know, let's get you in front of somebody who maybe does. Because that's so critical. Sarah put her hand up, so I'm going to let her speak.
So, when was it? Mid-December, Nate, I called you. My father,
Yes.
well, I'm going to tell you, how we need to have the proper system to be able to catch the people at the right moment. So my father's partner, she called me and she was like, your dad had a kind of blackout. And I called Nate. I'm like, what this could be? And it was like, could be this, an absent seizure. And I'm like, fuck. And we knew what it meant when an absent seizure happens. And then my father waited 2 weeks to go see the doctor. And the doctor was like, yeah, not a big deal, but I'll take away your driver's license and go for just, a brain scan, CAT scan, and we'll see what happens. See you in the month, 2 months, and 3 months when you get it done. And then they called back the very same night. They were like, you know what, just go to the emergency department, see what's going on. And my father got a brain cancer terminal diagnosis on December 27th. And my father has 2 to 6 weeks to live. What I'm worried is that if too many people fall into the cracks, the same situation as what my family's going through, what your family went through, what so many families are going through, is that we will know that there's a problem, but it's going to be too late and you cannot do anything. That's what I'm concerned about. Because when the meeting was with the neurosurgeon, there was nothing to do. We couldn't do anything. What I'm genuinely concerned, is that we will have a lot of people. Everybody's trained for a specialty for a reason. Yes, they can prescribe antibiotics for yeast and, medication for yeast infection, or, things like that, basic things they've been trained for. That's fine. I don't have a problem with that. But it's when we are relying too much on the Band-Aid and the solution is overwhelmed and cannot bring clarity to a lot of situations. That's when it gets dangerous. And it's unfortunate, but sometimes it's just too late.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I mean, the final thing on mine is I still don't entirely know. They think it's an autoimmune disorder. I now have in my medical team, aside from my stroke doctor and my cancer doctors and my absent regular doctor, because I don't have a regular family doctor right now. I get one and they stay for a month and they leave Alberta because, well, we know why. And I have my pharmacist and my dentist, because yes, especially if you've had heart issues, if you've got bad teeth, your dentist is definitely part of your healthcare team, because all you need is an infection in your teeth and it's the best way of screwing up your heart. Now I have an ophthalmologist who says I am never allowed to just go to the family doctor for anything to do with my eyes. I'm to see him or an optometrist who at least has all the right tools to look at things and know when to send you to an ophthalmologist. And I also have now a rheumatologist, because they're the ones that deal with autoimmune disorders.
If you get the full set, I hear they give you a set of steak knives.
Well, that would be cool, wouldn't it?
So you get something out of it.
And a free subscription to Reader's Digest.
Yeah.
There we go.
It's one of the things that makes me, amongst all the other things that makes me angry with the UCP, is they don't understand and they don't care to understand. That's the worst part about it. They don't get it and they don't really care to get it. And it's like, for me and probably a lot of the folk, disabled folk, actually everybody should be scared by it, but anybody who's had any serious medical issues, the idea and then I run into people who say, well, it's not meant for someone like you. I'm like, yeah, but when has it become someone like you that's just a normal person that doesn't need a lot of help from the doctor? When does someone like you become someone like me? because you won't know until it's too late.
Well, and this is why I opened the show the way that I did, because it's so fundamental and it's so easy. I see it all the time where people try to minimize. It's not that bad, or it's this or that. But if you're starting to get concerned about a health issue, talk to a trusted medical professional, because at the very least, if they're any good at all, their first reaction will be, well, here's the things that I'm thinking it could be, but you need to go see somebody who can actually do the things to determine what the things are. It's not an abuse of the healthcare system. And I'll tell you, I've been trying so hard not to put on my paramedic hat tonight. That's all good. I would, as a healthcare worker myself, I would much rather go to someone's house and see them having a problem, and it's a small little thing, and it's not a bother. That's no problem. You get called for the kid who got a thing stuck up their nose. That's fantastic. I could solve that problem in 5 minutes, 9 times out of 10. But I would so much rather that somebody asks for help early, so that you can get those interventions and you can get those diagnostics in place, than not, because the longer you wait, the harder it is.
Yeah.
So
I'll say goodnight.
Thank
Thanks
you,
for
Tammy.
having me on. Guys, have a great night.
Perfect. Well, we're going to end it with Andrea. Andrea, you got 10 minutes at the most. I want to go to bed.
I need to go to bed, dude. Seriously.
Okay. Sarah's going to tap out, and I'm going to bring Andrea in for our last thoughts of the night. That's my
Hi, guys. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. Sarah's tapping out.
Bye.
Bye, Sarah. I was thinking about the Tucker Carlson thing and how he's like kind of ghosting her a little bit.
Just a little.
A little bit. So, have you ever been to a convention in Vegas that has like keynote speakers?
No, I'd have to go to Vegas to do that, and I don't want to do that.
Me neither. I've been there so many times, and every time confirms that I'm just not a Vegas person. It's good for walking. It's good for getting your steps in.
There you go.
Actually, there's an antique bookstore that is like fantastic. But so I've been to those things a lot. All the keynote speakers and the evolution of like trends in e-commerce and who people put on stage has changed so much through the years. But this one time, I was part of the mentor level, like front row of a room that was like 4,000 e-commerce people, because I was part of the organizing side of it. And I sat there in the front row, and Robert Kiyosaki was like third day, end stage keynote. Everything builds up to it. You know, Rich Dad, Poor Dad?
I do not, but okay.
Okay, so there's a book called Rich Dad, Poor Dad, and it's his whole shtick is how he was born to a poor dad, but he lucked out by having a rich dad who like took him under his wing, and here's the difference, and here's how you get rich. Fun fact, he plans on being billions of dollars in debt when he dies and just leave it to everybody else to deal with.
I mean, if you can get the credit, I guess.
But that's not what he built his brand on. His brand was built on, like, I read his book back in the day. He was like, number one, we have his board game. Our kids play it. It's fantastic. However, he was on stage, and the people who were organizing were telling me about how much of a problem he was backstage because he's super misogynistic. So taking him into a restaurant was like he had handlers to make sure the waitresses didn't press charges, kind of thing.
Ooh.
And I'm sitting there going, what? And he's on stage espousing his stuff, but he's gone full 80-year-old grandpa who just rambles. It was crazy. Like, when you get to a certain point and you're put on stage, it's not always in the benefit for the person who put you on stage. Because the people who had to handle him, they did not have a good time. And it just reminded me of how Tucker is spoken about in different circles.
Well, I mean, here's the thing. I don't need to, and I don't like to. Like, one of the things that I've never said, and I never will, is Danielle Smith is a bad person. Because I don't know her, I've never met her. And the arguments and the behavior that she puts out into the ether is sufficient to critique and make fun of and make jokes about. But that's also what I do. Like,
Yeah.
we do commentary and satire. And the thing about that struck me the most about Tucker Carlson, other than the fact that, and I didn't sign up to be a member of the Tucker Nation or anything like that, because no. But from the two speeches that I saw him give, the two things that struck me was, A, here's somebody who thinks he's funny, and he's not. And like, it was, I think the persona that he's crafted for this particular genre of performance for himself is like, I'm going to imagine what Donald Trump would be like if he was doing stand-up. And Tucker even referred to himself in one of his speeches as like, oh, I love doing comedy. And it's like, when do you get to the funny part? Because right now you're just punching down.
Yeah.
You're a bully.
Well, he's played different characters before, right? Like
Yep.
when he was on Crossfire on CNN and PBS, and like that's his whole shtick, is he takes on a persona and just like grifts with it. So this was like a $250,000 weekend for him, wasn't it?
Oh, 100%. I've heard some people speculate that he made as much as $1 million once you include all of the VIP things and the autographs and the pictures and everything. But I mean, he's insincere. And that's the bottom line. And that's why I believe, whether or not he's a good person, that's why I believe no one should be listening to him, because he's insincere. And I don't have a problem saying the same thing about Danielle Smith, because she changes her positions so consistently that there is a stunning lack of sincerity. And I would much rather have a good faith throwdown with somebody who is sincere in their beliefs, then, it's
Yeah. So that's like, ugh. So she didn't bring up the parental rights thing at all. Nobody leaked anything, right? Like, she's been in front of groups of people for days on end. How did we not hear about parental rights stuff coming down this week?
I don't even know if there is. See, that's the fascinating thing to me, is because this is Danielle Smith on her radio show. And we know that when Danielle Smith is on her radio show, she just makes shit up. She's done it many times before. And so, when she says, and I find the language intriguing as well, because she talks about a policy, which is not legislation. And, we have Danielle Smith who speaks imprecisely. So I don't know whether or not this is Danielle Smith deliberately hedging the language to be like, we're going to put forward like a
plausible
statement of
deniability.
belief things, or is she actually going to introduce legislation? I don't think she's going to introduce legislation this week, because the legislature isn't in session until March. So to me, it feels like this is going to be a statement of support or what have you.
That's testing the waters.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. So as someone who's been a junior high teacher for a good decade over the time, I've only had to make one call to Child Protective Services. It is a devastating event. It is there should be counseling afterwards. It's traumatic to get to the point where you have to call somebody because you think a kid's life is in danger, especially when it's a 13-year-old boy, is life-changing. I've only had to do it once, and oh my God. Like, you don't get there by like somebody walking up to you and saying something offhand.
No.
That all comes because all of your spidey senses go whoop, because you know that kid well enough to make that call.
The frustrating thing for me, I already put the paramedic hat on, so I might as well put it on again. Here's my thing. And here's my thing that I wish that these politicians, and I use that with the derisive tone incredibly deliberately, tell you what, you cut a 12-year-old down and read the note, and then we can talk. Until you have done that, until you have faced that and understand what the full stakes are, stop. Just stop.
Yeah.
Because you don't know what you're talking about.
No, like it's parental rights. Like if that goes through, then everybody has to be really okay with the default mode becoming calling Child Protective Services.
Right? Like if
Kid
that's
comes out to you to protect yourself, you are going to have to call CPS because otherwise you're being negligent, right? So
but
where that was has been dealt with in very, very careful circumstances to avoid anything. Like, so the story I have, it was like a transplant kid who'd been around, moved around a lot, and macho kind of kid, grade 8 boy, but low, right? Like he'd moved around so much that he was behind academically, but a good kid. And I ate my lunch in my room all the time. And he came in to volunteer to help me. I started having to create jobs because he did not want to go outside. He didn't want to hang out with other kids. He just needed a place to be at lunch. And there's only so long you can sit in a room with a kid kind of like just watching you eat. So you have to give them jobs. But it became to the point where just small talk got deeper to the point I knew his family tree. He had to draw it. It had multiple trunks, lots of crossing branches. And then one day he came in with bruises on his neck and he told me that his dad did it. And I hung out with them as much as I could, but the first chance I got, I went to my vice principal and said, we need to talk right now. And she had to teach me how to call CPS. Like, you're not going to do that unless you think a parent is hurting a kid. And if a kid tells me that they're afraid to come out to their parent,
it's on the parent. I don't care. I don't care whose feelings get hurt anymore. Again, like this whole parental rights thing is about control. Period. End of sentence. And
okay, so it's the parent's right to get CPS called on them then.
Okay, I can roll with that.
There we go. That one's a good ender.
Yeah,
that was good.
That's good. Perfect. Thanks, Andrea.
Okay, bye.
Okay, and that is the end of this marathon episode of the Breakdown. I'm going to rip through the obligatory plugs. Everybody can stick around for them if you'd like, because we do have merch that we are selling from time to time. We've got the t-shirts, we've got the hoodies, we've got the mugs, we've got the toques, the beanies, as some people call them. All of these you can get at abpoly.ca, and you should buy them, please, because we have more FOIP things to file. We got a couple big projects we're working on. We got just to give you a heads up on some things that we got coming down the pipes. We are going to be producing a conversation with a renowned political scientist to talk about the whole Tucker Carlson debacle and the implications for what that could mean for the Premier's office. As well as the implications of what this parental rights thing could look like. We're also going to we are into the developmental stages of our deep dive on a certain Lord Standard Media outlet, and it's going to be all kinds of fun. I don't think Tucker would approve of them. I'm just spitballing. I don't know, but I bet. All of that being said, we're able to produce the kind of content that we do because of the support that we get from our Patreon sponsors. So if you appreciate the kind of content that we're producing, we'd love nothing more than if you signed up to be one of our Patreon sponsors at www.patreon.com/thebreakdownab. That's about all that I'm going to do for plugs because I'm tired. I'm very tired now. 3 hours is long. 3.5 hours, y'all. That's a long show. It's excessive. It's going to be in 2 parts. That's how we're going to do it. We'll be back next Sunday, though, Might be a little earlier. We might do a 7 o'clock start, not so that we can go as long, but so that I can have a reasonably adult bedtime. And we hope to be dropping that political science episode tomorrow night for our Patreon sponsors, and for everybody else, probably Wednesday or Thursday. In the meantime, and in between time, before we see you next time, as always, there's a lot going on. There's a lot to be frustrated about, but you still got to take time to find the happy. Take care of yourselves. And as always, keep the conversation going.